So in today's video we are gonna see what if Jedi Deku was in Star Wars and had harem, part 1. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is The Jedi Hero, Force by Anthony Tyler 9. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Coruscant 14 BBY. 3A young Padawan within the main building of the Jedi Grand Order is seen training with his master within the training zone. He is dodging attacks as well as attacking his master with his smaller lightsaber as he clashes with the Grand Master Yoda. The old creature had been training the boy since he sensed his massive power within the Force that would soon become a rival for the up-and-coming Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. The young boy had green curly hair that had black roots, and freckles on each cheek that allowed his eyes to stand out even more. They were big orbs that showed his true emotions whenever he battles, as well as their color was amazing in its own right. They were the color of emeralds as they were really bright, almost seemingly jade in color. The young Padawan had been training for about a year and a half in the fifth form of combat with a lightsaber. The fifth form of fighting with a lightsaber was called Sheem Gemso, where it was perfect for countering an opponent's attacks as well as counter the second form of combat Makashi. As soon as their impromptu training session was complete, the master had a lot to say to the young Padawan. Young Izuku, training does you well. Go I must, Wookiee's help I must give. Train yourself, and a Jedi Knight you will become, soon. May the Force be with you and protect your youngling siblings. The old master said, as he hobbled away. As Izuku was seen walking towards his small room given to him by his master, he decided to meditate on how to balance his mind as well as soul in order to keep himself from falling to the dark side of the Force. He was taught from a very young age from the old master that if he allowed the dark side to interfere with his thoughts as well as mind, he would not be capable of returning to the light unless a catalyst prevented him from doing so. So as he sat in his room meditating, he overheard something that was going on just outside of the room. Stay here, Skywalker, we must take down the Chancellor in order to protect the entire order. Master Windu's voice came out urgently. Izuku shook his head as he opened the door to his room to find Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker standing in the middle of the area looking distraught. Mr. Anakin, are you okay? Izuku asked, looking at the taller young man. Don't worry, Padawan Izuku, I'm fine. Just thinking about my relationship with the Jedi. The young Jedi Knight said, as he moved to leave. Unknown to him, Izuku didn't trust his words and followed behind him as he made to see what was truly going on. He even started to record what the young man was going to do when they were led all the way to the Chancellor's office, where a fight had already broken out. As he watched as Master Windu and the other masters fought a red light-sabered Palpatine, he watched in horror as the Chancellor had taken down trained masters of the Force as well as combat with little to no ease before being defeated by Master Windu. He watched on as Anakin had entered the room as Izuku continued to record the situation with a completely calm look on his face. Master Windu, this isn't the Jedi way. We must take him to the court to talk about his misdoings. Anakin said, which was technically correct. Don't you see, Skywalker? He is too dangerous to be kept alive. He is the Sith. The older master said, as he raised his blade. Please don't kill me, save me, Anakin. The Chancellor called out to the young man. I still need him. Skywalker called out as he sliced the dropping hand of Windu off the master's body. Now you die. Palpatine called out, blasting the old master with electricity out of the window. Izuku held back a gasp as he watched the event happen, and he then watched as the old man had then turned to Anakin, believing that he was going to kill the young Jedi Knight. He was then completely blindsided as the Sith had recruited Anakin as a Sith. Taking this moment as his chance to send the information to his master, he got ready to leave when he heard the voice of Palpatine as he entered the elevator. Command to all stormtroopers. Execute Order 66. The Chancellor said, as the elevator doors closed. Izuku ran towards his bedroom in order to collect all of his belongings as he made sure to leave a ship out for him to escape with. He had run towards the younglings in order to help them escape from the compound when he already found them dead. Not wanting to waste his own life searching for any survivors, he ran towards the shipping docks and found a small ship that was given to him by Master Yoda. Turning on an emergency device that allowed him to talk to the Grand Master, it turned on as the old Jedi looked at his fearful face in alarm. Youngling Izuku. Happened what? The old master asked, urgently. The entire Jedi Order is about to fall. don't trust the clone troopers. They are being told to kill all Jedi, Izuku said, as he overhears his master get shot at. As he thought that his master was dead, he overhears his master speak over the Wookiee he was with. Protect the people, can you do? Wuorg? The Wookiee called out, as Master Yoda made a humming sound. Youngling Izuku, leave the planet you must. Not seen you must be. Return to Coruscant I will, and defeat Sith, the old master said, as he turned off the transmission. Izuku had started his little aircraft as he looked to the right and saw Anakin staring at it with a fury in his eyes as Izuku gained a fearful look on his face. Turning it on and blasting off into the galaxy as fast as he could, he looked back in the mirrors as he watched the planet undergo siege as well as a ship head away from the planet for him. Turning on the thrusters to get him past hyperspace, he blasted as fast as he could to the furthest part of the galaxy where the Jedi and Sith hadn't made their presence known yet. It was in the direction of his original home world of Earth. He was an orphan on the planet as his mother had mysteriously disappeared after his birth and he wouldn't question it further. He was just about to reach the planet's atmosphere when he heard the sounds of a ship blasters going off. Trying to land on the planet as fast as possible, he ran the risk of being shot down, and for a second, he thought he lost the young Sith before the sounds of his wings being shot off were heard. He placed himself in a portion of the ship to protect himself from being hurt. He was glad he added this portion of the ship in himself since that meant Skywalker wouldn't know where he was. When his ship crash landed into the ground nearby a beach that was storing up some trash, it landed just perfectly enough that it was well hidden from the new Sith Lord. He waited in his cockpit with a bated breath as he heard the sound of his ship be torn apart as well as shredded to pieces. Damn, it seems that it was a phony. I can't believe I lost one. No matter, as soon as I return, I will avenge the death of Padme, and make sure that Obi-Wan doesn't get in my way. The young Sith said, as he got in his ship and left the area. Izuku would wait for a while before he knew that the presence of the young man was truly gone, and he pulled himself out of the cockpit of his ship. Looking at the area, he saw that he landed on a trashy beach, and he shook his head from the G-forces that was causing him to become dizzy. Landing on the ground, the 9-year-old had moved around the beach as he tried to make it to where he could find out where in the world he was located. After regaining some semblance of consciousness, he walked up the stairs to the street that was nearby and saw some kids in a park. He saw a couple of children playing with one another as a small group harassed a smaller kid who held his arm in pain. Not being one to allow his fellow man to be abused, Izuku ran over to see what was wrong. What is going on here? Izuku asked. He looked at the small group of kids his age as they stared at him. Who are you? I've never seen you here before, the blond boy said, as Izuku glared at him. They are bullying me for how I have a cool quirk. The boy on the ground called out crying. What is this quirk? Izuku asked, as the boy showed his ability to grow fire from his hands. That is a cool superpower, but you shouldn't bully your peers because they have a cool power. What is yours, blonde? Izuku asked, bluntly as the boy made a few pops. Explosion. I can make my hands explode with power. I will become the next #1 hero, and no one is going to stop me. The boy exclaimed as Izuku stared at him. Far be it from me to stop you from your dreams, but if you want to be a hero, you need to learn that heroes don't just beat villains up. They save people from villains and any kind of situation they're suffering from. Izuku explained as the blond boy looked at him with disgust. Are you quirkless? He asked, as Izuku shrugged. Well, if you're quirkless, what are you hoping to be? The boy called out, popping his hands. I don't know, you wouldn't even believe what kind of situation I'm in. Might as well become the next best thing to what I have lost, a hero. Izuku said, looking at the sky. Well, quirkless people can't become heroes. The boy said, as Izuku looked at him, and why not? Izuku asked, concerned. Because they're too weak. They don't deserve to live with our time, they shouldn't even exist. The boy said, as Izuku slapped him on the cheek. You don't say that about your fellow man, the way you're going. I can easily see that you could become a villain with that attitude if you don't change it. Izuku said, moving to walk away. As soon as the young boy got pissed off, he ran towards Izuku and attacked him, only to be put flat on his ass as the young boy flipped him whilst he was midair and grabbed his arm and slammed him into the ground. Make sure to remember that heroes don't always fight villains, they protect the weak as well as innocent, Izuku said, walking away. Unknown to Izuku, his master had lost his battle against Palpatine and had fled to isolation, never to be heard from again in his lifetime. As Izuku had walked over to the nearest orphanage, he found that they were really kind to him, although they really should stop with the quirkist behavior. He had told them that he didn't really have a quirk, but they were adamant that if he was quirkless that he should do all the chores as well as get punished if he does anything wrong. And so, as he does all these menial things, he doesn't notice how he can feel all the presences of the Jedi slowly be wiped out from the entire galaxy, the only ones who are left being Obi-Wan Kenobi, Grand Master Yoda, and a few stragglers who managed to escape the purge of the Jedi Order. And in his disappearance from the Jedi's lost and fallen order, a new empire is raised from the ashes, and it will soon terrorize the galaxy and place it into a stranglehold. Zuko woke up as multiple blunt weapons landed on his chest that morning. It had officially been exactly 5 years since the fall of the Jedi Order, and he had been living on Earth. As he groaned in pain in the bed, the person who woke him up was a beautiful woman who had a very well-endowed physique, who had a very voluptuous body as well. She had long brown hair, who had been very rude to him since he first arrived at the orphanage. "Get up, you worthless brat. I can't believe that I have to waste time in waking you up every morning," the woman said, as Izuku begrudgingly woke up as he stood up from the bed. As a 14-year-old boy, he had been privy to many forms of torture as well as abuse from the orphanage, as he basically was a prisoner inside the building. When one of the children would accidentally break something, he took the blame for it so that they could be kept safe. The woman had abused them all in the past, and he wouldn't be a hero or a Jedi if he didn't protect the innocent as well as keep the peace. So long as he was the one being injured on the daily as well as take all the blame for things that the younger children do, he was fine with that. As he walked out of the bedroom where he was constantly abused like no tomorrow, he made his way towards the kitchen in order to cook for the children and skip breakfast. It was just like in the Jedi Order, where some Jedi went weeks to years without food. Izuku had doubled that time frame in terms of no food. His powers in the Force were getting stronger as he grew, and he always trained in the dead of night when he knew that nobody would see him, training to master his growing power. As he entered the kitchen, he started to make pancakes as well as eggs and ham when the woman entered the kitchen and watched as he cooked the food. She was trying to get him to eat even though he told her that he was fasting for the longest time, but no matter how many times she had forced him to eat, she just decided that he was punishing himself over the years for the other children and just decided to beat him awake every morning as her punishment. The other children didn't like how he took all the blame as well as the beatings for them, but as soon as they saw what happens during the beatdown of Izuku, they wisely decided to stop breaking things as well as doing things to get him in trouble. Izuku was walking to school now. He had finished breakfast and saved a little bit for himself since he was incredibly hungry. With how his stomach had shrunk to near nothing, he had been starving to the point that he couldn't take it anymore and was slowly increasing his food intake. He knew that being a hero meant that he needed to be aware of his ability to fight instead of working with his brain. Arriving at the school, he sighed in sadness as his day would only continue to get worse from here on out. If you thought about the fact that Izuku taking a beating for the children as well as being starved by the woman in charge of the orphanage was bad enough, the people at his school didn't think that was enough and made it their mission to get him to commit suicide. He took it in stride though. The only one who even tried to fight him was Bakugo, and the boy took his fights with him as a challenge to get stronger. But the boy had been keeping an eye on him more nowadays since Izuku's body type had been slowly degrading to the point where he was almost skin and bones. The boy, not having his rival to be reduced to almost nothing in terms of a physical fighter of his prowess, kept feeding him enough to keep him going, even if it was forced. Izuku walked into his classroom for the day, and the students were now getting more concerned with his health since he kept decreasing in weight as well as his eyes were beginning to become more sunken in. As the teacher talked about how Izuku and Katsuki were going to Ua, the boy defended him for once as he stated that out of all of them, Deku had the ability to stand by his side as an equal or even slightly worse than the boy himself. Izuku smiled sadly at the slightly older boy as he shook his head and went back into his notes for the class as well as his quirk analysis notes. As soon as he finished them, and the school day was over, Bakugo walked over to him as he basically demanded an answer. "All right, Deku, you're worrying everyone in the school, so why don't you just let it out already?" Bakugo yelled in his face as he slammed his fists on Izuku's desk. "What are you talking about? Izuku asked, innocently. This. You are losing weight faster than I can feasibly feed you, and the fact that you sometimes throw it up later on is extremely worrying. My mom has been trying to adopt you for weeks and they haven't allowed her to. Quote. The boy said, greatly surprising all three boys with him. What are you talking about? I can't be worth adopting. Izuku said, as the boy in front of him stared at him angrily. All right, that is it. I am calling the police about why you are being beaten and abused in that specific orphanage. Bakugo said, as he knocked Izuku out with a hard chop to the neck. This is Musudafu Police Department, how can I help you? A female voice called out. My name is Bakugo Katsuki, and I would like to report an abuse case to you all. Bakugo said, as the woman on the other side of the phone bristled at the tone. Tsukauchi Naomasa had been a detective for almost 35 years. He had been working on cases with All Might for almost as long as he had been made aware of other cases he worked on with another hero Eraserhead. But when he got a phone call from one of his police officers of the precinct, he wasn't prepared for the massive abuse case as well as neglect that the boy was talking about. So can you run that by me again, Bakugo-san? Tsukauchi asked, as he stared at the words on his paper. Alright, so it starts like this. Deku showed up about 5 years ago on the beach when I was beating up another boy who was making fun of me. Then he told me that he was going to the orphanage since he didn't have a mother or father, but when he told me that the place is horrible at school, he meant it. The woman in charge of the place is abusive, neglectful, and for the love of God, she wakes him up by beating him with a blunt weapon on his ribs. She has been doing this since he showed up and stated that he was quirkless. Bakugo said, as he was getting more emotional in the call. Alright, can you tell me the address of the building? Tsukauchi asked, as Bakugo gave him the exact address. Arriving at the school he found an unconscious green-haired boy on the ground as Bakugo was sitting on a bench as Tsukauchi had moved over. Pulling out his radio he called for an ambulance to be called over to get a child in need of help. Alright, can you tell me everything you know about that orphanage? Tsukauchi said, as Bakugo just gave him a look. I can do you more than that, I can provide evidence that they are cruel to the children as well as Deku. Bakugo said, pulling out his phone and showing the detective all the scars as well as burns on Izuku's body. This is enough to place them in prison for life, and about the other children. Are they neglected as well as abused? Tsukauchi asked. TCH. Useless Deku keeps on taking the blame as well as beatings for them when they break or lie about something. He won't allow them to be hurt by the woman in there. Keeps saying shit like it isn't what a hero would do to leave them behind. But there is another thing that confuses me about what he said. Bakugo said, as Tsukauchi looked in confusion. What do you mean? He asked, pulling out a clip card. He keeps saying that it isn't the Jedi way to beat someone up for not being a good person. Bakugo said, as we skip some time before entering the hospital. It has been a few hours since Tsukauchi had arrested the woman for multiple charges of human trafficking as well as manslaughter, first-degree murder, and having MLA beliefs. The most concerning part about it was the fact that the place looked as clean as it could get, and the woman proudly stated that the quirkless freak could clean better than her on a good day. So now they were in the hospital as they waited for Izuku to wake up from his slumber as he was sleeping in the bed. So Bakugo-san, are you willing to take Izuku on as your son? Tsukauchi asked. Yeah, I have been trying to get the place disowned for a while now because of their abuse of that boy. I remember my friend Inko having a boy like him before she was killed in a villain attack before this small green goblin with sharp ears showed up in a weird ship. He was talking nonsense about these midi-chlorians or whatever that the boy had and that he would train him himself. As soon as they left, I couldn't remember what happened. Mitsuki Bakugo said, as she stared at the boy. Well, we had confirmed from blood testing that his name is actually Midoriya Izuku. And how he came back to you guys like this is terrible, I'm sorry for your loss. Tsukauchi said, as they heard mumbling. What was that Izuku? Mitsuki asked, as Izuku mumbled more in his sleep as he said, some words. Master, where are you? I can't sense your F-Force energy. Izuku mumbled before waking up with a gasp and breathing heavily. Midoriya, are you okay? Tsukauchi asked, as Izuku looked around in fear. What happened? Where are the other Jedi? Izuku scrambled on the bed. Hey, don't worry young man. You're safe. I don't know who this Jedi you are talking about is, but it seems that you have been living here for 5 years. Can you tell me what happened? Sukauchi asked. I was training on Sea Coruscant, with Master Yoda. He was the master who took me on as an apprentice. I was done training with him, and then he had to go to another planet to protect some Wookiees. They were giant creatures filled with hair, as they were intelligent enough to wield weapons. I was keeping an eye on Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, because he was acting funny. So I followed him to Chancellor Palpatine's office and found some other masters of the Jedi Order fighting Palpatine. And the Chancellor was wielding a red lightsaber. Also, a lightsaber is a weapon that a Jedi and Sith use to fight one another. We also use a power called the Force. It allows us to use a telekinetic power to aid us in our fight against the Sith. The Jedi use the light side of the Force to protect peace, as well as are called peacemakers. The Sith are people or creatures who had either been once Jedis who fell to the dark side of the Force and have decided that the way of the Jedi is not the way they should go. Chancellor Palpatine had turned Anakin into a Sith. In order to escape Coruscant, I had to get into a ship and fly away, but not before I informed my master about the order Palpatine had ordered the clone troopers before leaving. Izuku said, breathing softly but fast. What was this order? Sukauchi asked, as everything rang true. It was the execution of all Jedi warriors. Order 66. It was programmed into them in the event that a Jedi had betrayed the Jedi Order to protect Coruscant from enemies. Izuku said, as Sukauchi looked at him. How does one use this Force? The man asked. In order to use the Force, one must be trained hard in the abilities it can grant you, ranging from flight to telekinesis and telepathy. The one I am most trained in was telekinesis, and that was Master Yoda's teaching to me that I learned it. But it is the usage of the midi-chlorians in your blood as well as collect over the years and allowed you to use essentially superpowers from comic books. Izuku explained as Sukauchi was slowly gaining a headache. How many Jedi are there out there in the cosmos? Mitsuki asked, as Izuku thought about it before sensing the Jedi within the Force. No. That's not possible, Izuku said, looking more panicked. What is wrong, Deku? Bakugo asked, looking at Izuku concerned. There isn't many Jedi left, the only ones left are me and 2 of Skywalker's children. And one of them is fighting Skywalker as of right now, Izuku said, looking pale. Well, at least you're safe, young man. What happens if you are found out on this planet? Mitsuki asked, concerned. The only ones who can sense my power is Chancellor Palpatine as well as Anakin Skywalker, but they don't know that I live here. For all they know, I am dead, Izuku said, as Sukauchi asked a hard question. How did you get back to Earth from Coruscant, since that place you talked about is a planet, right? Sukauchi asked. Coruscant is the place where Chancellor Palpatine had full control of. It is where the Jedi Order had battled the Sith in order to bring peace to the galaxy. But I was shot down in the atmosphere when entering the Earth. Former Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker had shot me down after following me all the way here. Thankfully I had placed a new compartment in my ship to allow me to hide within it from him. He couldn't sense me since I hid my power from him, Izuku said, as Sukauchi nodded. Where did you land? Bakugo asked. I landed in Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. On the beach, Izuku said, as Bakugo nodded. Don't worry about returning to the orphanage, young man. You will not be returning there since you will be adopted by the Bakugo's family, Sukauchi said, as Izuku looked at her in shock. Why, you didn't have to do that, Izuku said, looking distraught. Don't worry, young man. I promised your mother that I would make sure that you were protected from anything. I couldn't keep that promise after you disappeared, but I will be keeping it now. Also, I need to make sure that you get a girlfriend soon, the woman said, as Izuku looked at her funny. A Jedi can't get into a relationship with another person. It is against the Jedi code, Izuku said, as Mitsuki looked at him. These Jedi won't allow a relationship between a Jedi and another person, Mitsuki asked, as Izuku nodded his head. Master Yoda said that it brings the emotions that we hide out from where we hold them down. To bring out our emotions in the middle of battle makes it easier for the dark side of the Force to assist in our fall, Izuku said, as Mitsuki looked at him. Well, who is your master and where is he now? Mitsuki asked, as Izuku looked away. He's passed on. He is within the will of the Force, Izuku said, as Mitsuki stared at him. Well, since he's dead you don't have to listen to his rules anymore, Mitsuki said, as Izuku looked at her in shock. But, Izuku said, as the woman spoke. Tut tut, no, you will get into a relationship with a girl in the future if I have any say about it. There is not any way for you to stop me from doing this. You are human at heart and will discover the feeling of needing to reproduce at some point. I will not miss that, she said, as she walked away to file out paperwork. Be prepared, Deku, she will be feeding you as well as making sure that you get a girlfriend soon. So you better get yourself out of those useless Jedi ways. It's what got them killed anyway, Bakugo said, as Izuku was left there to think about the Jedi Order and their laws. Is it really true that they died because of their hubris? Izuku thought to himself looking out the window. Izuku had been thinking about the life he lived as a Jedi. He had been living within their rules as well as regulations for years before he became the Padawan of Grand Master Yoda. The man was like his idol for what a true Jedi was to become in the future, but from what Katsuki had told him these last few years, it was starting to make him think. What if I used the power of the dark side of the Force and combined it with the light? Like Master Windu did, Izuku thought aloud to himself. He had been eating more as well as gaining weight since he was finally adopted by the Bakugos. Although Katsuki still bullied him relentlessly because he wanted to get Izuku angry, the young man didn't fall into the trap of the dark side at all. But now that he was thinking about it, he decided to learn a bit about the Earth as well as sense it to see if it was somewhere he could learn the Force. As soon as he started to meditate in his bedroom that night, he felt the Force within the planet itself, and was surprised to find out that it was a Force nexus. It was in terms of the natural Force energy of the entire galaxy. A neutral zone who allowed everyone to come by. Izuku found out later on as he found a kyber crystal inside some quartz within the countertop from the kitchen that the common earth metal could be used to find and create a new lightsaber as well as rebuild the Jedi Order. Smiling to himself as he meditated, he allowed the dark side of the Force to swell within his mind as he kept himself calm. Deep within the confines of his mind, he found himself staring at an evil version of himself. He was calm and collected like himself who always delved within the light. This version of himself was even more powerful in the dark side of the Force as he glared at Izuku with hatred as well as anger. Sighing to himself, he pulled out a lightsaber of his creation from within his mind as he looked at his opponent with a smile on his face. He will defeat this evil version of himself, and gain control over the dark side of the Force that dwells within himself, and he will make sure that it doesn't get free from his grip. Izuku woke up the next morning extremely sore. The battle he had with his evil doppelganger had been harsh as well as enough to make him wish that he couldn't have been more filled with the light. The evil version of himself had nearly defeated him in lightsaber combat since he focused more on the intricacies of battle than the will of the Force. Izuku had learned from Master Qui-Gon Jinn that one must become one with the Force in order to become stronger with it. And Izuku took that saying to heart and made sure that he increased his abilities with the Force, as well as trained his combat prowess with a lightsaber. The better duelist he was as well as better control over the Force he had. The more people he could save. He had managed to find his ship that was within Dagobah Municipal Beach Park and found it ironic that the humans of Earth called a sandy beach Dagobah. From what the Jedi archives had stated, the planet was filled with trash as well as evil beings who would try and control others. And as soon as he found his spaceship, he dragged it back to his home within the Bakugo's house backyard as he began to make adjustments to its console controls as well as data banks. Katsuki had also taken it upon himself to help Izuku clean up the beach in order to train themselves for the UA entrance exams. The two had the weirdest relationship between one another by the way. Katsuki would attack him every day at school, but whenever the two were together at the beach he would attempt to get Izuku to use the Force more in order to get his thoughts on how quirks came about. They used this time to increase their thoughts about what the world wanted with quirks as well as how they would fare against the outer galaxy. As he shook himself out of his own thoughts, he found himself standing before the completely clean beach just a few days before the entrance exams for the school. Looking over at Katsuki, the boy was looking on in pride at the work the duo had done. Izuku had finally beaten it into the boy's head that heroes help everyone, but at the same time, they make sure that villains don't hurt civilians. Although the boy took it as a literal challenge to his ideals that Izuku was forcing onto him, so they made a bet, if Izuku would only assist those in the entrance exams he wouldn't get as many points as Katsuki would just attacking the bots without saving anyone. Izuku took that challenge as he nodded and gave Katsuki some advice Yoda gave him in his early days of becoming a Jedi. My master once told me, Katsuki, that one doesn't follow the will of the fight, but the will of the Force. You must push aside your pride in order to see the bigger picture, and if you can't, never become what you wish to become. Izuku said, as he left the boy with things to think about. It was now time for the entrance exams as Izuku entered the grounds of UA as he noticed that there were multiple students within the place as they were happy. These people don't know that the power of All Might is waning. I've seen it from the way he fights, but they are simply going complacent. Izuku thought to himself as he heard about how All Might was becoming a teacher at UA. As he entered the classroom where he was going to take the written test, he found that there was a teacher who was green in color and was looking more like a cell within the human body compared to others. All right students, the entrance exam test for the school will begin as soon as all the test papers are handed out. Make sure that you don't cheat, since those who do will be immediately banned from taking this school's courses. The man said, as Izuku gained a look of determination. As soon as Izuku gained his paper for his test, he looked at the questions that were most intriguing to himself first and foremost as he did them first. It wasn't because of the fact that they were hard to do, but it was because of the meaning behind them. Such as the one question that caused Izuku to really think hard about it. What truly makes what a hero does heroic? As he looked at the question, it could be read in many ways compared to the average person. It could be read as what are the true factors that make a hero, or what kinds of quirks could be used to become a hero. But Izuku knew the answer to this question. It was asking what the factor in a hero makes their actions truly heroic. What makes a true hero in this world is that their actions convey that they truly don't wish for anything in return. They just want to make sure that the person they are saving is okay as well as safe from all harm. They make sure that the civilians are all right, feeling safe, as well as happy about the presence of a hero. Izuku mumbled to himself. He never got rid of his habit to speak his mind in unrecognizable mumbles to himself, but he couldn't help it. There were some other questions that nearly stumped him, but he kept to himself and realized the problems with the questions and answered them to the best of his ability. And soon after he was finished, he found out that he had completed the test within the first half hour of the required 3 hours needed. He decided to use the remaining 2.5 hours in order to review his answers and change them if they seemed more undecided. As soon as the written portion of the entrance exams were complete, he turned his in with the other students as he left the room. Unaware of the fact that the hero who was looking at his paper was currently looking over the small corrections that Izuku made to the original questions on the test. He looked back at the retreating boy as he entered the auditorium as he released a sigh of exasperation. Nezu might like this hero hopeful, he said, audibly as he heard cackling over the intercoms of the building. He shuddered as we moved to look at our protagonist. Sitting in his seat right next to Katsuki, the two looks at their papers for where they will be taking their exams as they looked slightly miffed that they weren't in the same area zones as one another. Izuku had made sure that his quirk information had been stated to be called Force. It was made to be completely vague about how it could be used since there was so little information about it. As Present Mike talked about the entrance exams, practical portion of the test, Izuku mumbled to himself about the rules as well as the robots that they were supposed to defeat. Hey Katsuki, am I allowed to take down some robots in order to cement my placement in the school? Izuku mumbled over to Katsuki as the boy merely grunted in acceptance. As soon as the explanation was complete, Izuku had prepared himself mentally as they were leaving the auditorium as he got onto a bus. Quite literally, he sat on the top of the bus and crossed his legs over the other as he started to meditate to himself to clear his mind of all corruption-like thoughts in order to complete his task for the day. As soon as they all arrived, Izuku simply dropped to the ground as he landed on the ground and walked over to the doors of the place and started to stretch himself. He pulled out his lightsaber that he made during the interim before the UA entrance exams as he deconstructed it before reconstructing it as he allowed himself to be in a meditative state in order to calm himself down. As soon as some of the other students were beginning to talk to one another, Izuku began to breathe in slowly as he made sure that his quickly beating heart was calmed down enough to take on this trial. Are you sure that you should be holding that weapon here? The boy who interrupted Present Mike's information dump before the practical asked Izuku. I was given express permission to use it. Don't worry about the other students. I won't use my weapon against them, Izuku said, smiling at the young man as he nodded. If I could satiate my curiosity about that weapon, could you inform me about what it is? The boy asked, as Izuku looked over at him. Maybe after the exam, would you like to become friends after this? Izuku asked, as the boy smiled. I would, meet you after the exams. He asked, as Izuku nodded. And go, Present Mike called out, as Izuku took off. Man, that guy is going to be disqualified. He didn't even tell us to leave yet. A few students said, as the boy from before who asked Izuku a couple questions moved out as well as a brown-haired girl. The other students became slightly worried before Present Mike looked at them disappointed before yelling. What are you waiting for? Those three already are building up points. There's no start in heroics. Present Mike called out. 1. It had been a few minutes since the exam had started, and the judges were beginning to see the real people that some students were. Some were rescuing others from certain situations that would have gotten them hurt or defended them by taking the hit or defeating the opponent for them. And the judges were incredibly happy about how some of the students were more heroic than the previous years that had happened. But there was one person who wasn't liking how this was going as he kept a close eye on one student who was showing promise as a rescue hero but stopped collecting villain points. Did he find out about the rescue points? I wonder who informed him. The man asked, in shadows. Well, I wonder who he is. A small creature said, as he pulled up a few files that held some students before finding the student in question. Izuku Midoriya. I wonder why he is only going for rescue points. Although the quirk for the boy states it is called Force. It is extremely vague as it has nothing in what it could do. That is very dangerous for our jobs. The creature said, offhandedly before smiling at the boy in question. Another shadow looked at the camera on the boy as he saw the boy save some more people, and exclusively assist them in making sure that they got some points of their own. He's got the makings of a true hero and leader. The man said, as he smiled at the screens. As the other teachers made comments about perfect combat prowess, scouting, as well as many other professions within the heroics courses within their school, they decided to release their biggest threat upon the course. Well, I guess it's time for the zero-pointer to make their appearance. I wonder how the students would react to our greatest creations. Power Loader, do the honors. The creature said, as the man nodded. Yes, sir. The man said, moving to push a button to release the monster of a machine. As Izuku had saved another contestant from a robot that could have hurt them since they weren't aware of it, he moved towards the middle. He had enough points to get into the hero course by now within his count. He had around 40 points for villains, and he made sure to keep saving people. It was beaten into him from a young age to protect others within the Jedi Order, and make sure that they were all right before moving on. But as soon as he entered the main street, he found some other students making hell upon the robots within the place as the ground began to quake. Holding himself well with the force, he looked over to where he felt a disturbance within the force and slowly made his way over there. As soon as he found a giant robot standing before him about several stories tall, he slowly made his way towards the monster of a robot intent on stopping it. For just a moment though the navy blue-haired boy had run past him, but in that singular moment they looked into each other's eyes before moving on. Just as he was about to push himself towards the robot, Izuku turned on his lightsaber, and when he was in a crouched position, that was when he heard it. Please someone. Help me. A girl called out, as Izuku looked over. He found a brown-haired girl looking out for help as she tried to pull off some rubble from her back but couldn't reach. Pushing the force out with his left hand since his right hand held his lightsaber, Izuku pushed the rocks off the girl softly, allowing her to move out of the way in time before a tread had crushed the rocks he had moved. The girl looked over at him before finding him staring right at the machine as it looked down at him, and a weird sound came from it. You are the zero-pointer, huh? I wonder how much of the force you can stop. Izuku said, before pointing his hand towards the massive man-made creature. He could feel the machine's parts from the force and started to wreak havoc within it as it started to explode around its head as well as around its entire body. Soon within seconds after being revealed to everyone within his battle arena, the zero-pointer was defeated and fell backwards, missing the girl as she jumped towards the boy who was about to be hit with some rebar. As she tackled him to the ground, the rebar that was about to hit Izuku punctured the ground where they once were. Izuku looked over to where the rebar was and looked honestly terrified before looking down at his savior. "Why, you saved me," he said, stuttering a little. "Couldn't let the boy who saved me get hurt after saving me," the girl said, before her face became green. Izuku lifted her with the force and moved her over to a nearby trash can as she threw up within it. Izuku rubbed her back as she threw up rainbows as he mumbled softly about what her quirk could be to himself. It seemingly put the girl at ease as her entire body relaxed under his calm and soft hands. And that is all, folks. I hope you all enjoyed your day of getting to ruin some robots. See you all when you get into UA and receive your letters in a week's time. Present Mike called out on the intercom. "Are you all right, miss?" Izuku asked, as he continued to rub the girl's back. "Why, yeah. Sorry about nearly throwing up on you," the girl said, as Izuku nodded. "I'm Izuku Midoriya, and you are?" Izuku asked, as the girl responded. "My name is Uraraka Ochako. Are you American by chance?" Ochako asked. No, I was born in Japan. Just lived in an orphanage for most of my life, and I learned how to speak English from a young age. It's my second known language," Izuku said, as the girl smiled at him. "Well, do you want to hang out with me when we leave?" Ochako asked, as Izuku nodded. "You mind taking on another person into this adventure?" Izuku asked, as the girl tilted her head. "What do you mean?" she asked, as Izuku pointed over at the rigid boy coming over. "I don't know who he is, but I asked if he would like to hang out later and he accepted." "You want to join us?" Izuku asked, as the girl nodded happily. It was here that Izuku realized how close he was with the girl as he distanced himself slightly from her with a red face. "Sorry for being so close to you without your permission," Izuku said, as the girl remembered how close they were. Don't worry about it, it's not like it was dangerous or anything," the girl said, offhandedly before hearing him state something. "Love isn't the Jedi way, I need to clear all feelings," Izuku mumbled to himself as he placed himself in a meditative state again. The girl looked concerned for him as she looked at the boy who had just arrived, and as they looked at one another, they shrugged, believing it to be something with the boy's personality. They left the school as the faculty were entering the zone the trio were in as they looked at the zero-pointer in intrigue as well as shock. How was that boy capable of messing with the systems of the machine? It registered him as an S-class villain threat, Power Loader said, as he looked over the remnants of his prized machine. S-class villain, huh? Wonder who could have that level of power? A black-haired man asked, as he glared at the robot. If this was the work of the boy, he had trained from an extremely early age to get this powerful as a mere teenager. A blonde gaunt man said, as he kneeled over the robot. Izuku had been walking to UA, he had gotten his entrance letter from the school stating that he was allowed into the school. He was so happy that he could at least do something in order to become something similar to how the Jedi had once been capable of doing. But if anything, he couldn't wait to train some of the quirkless population in the will of the Force during his time as his own personal Jedi Master. On Earth, he would become the Grand Master of the Order of Jedi. He wouldn't fall under the same hubris of the previous Jedi that allowed them to be usurped by the Sith all those years ago. Entering the school grounds, he walked around the place until he found his classroom for the next 3 years. Class 1B. Entering the classroom, he found out that the class was mainly comprising of women as he found more girls in the classroom than there originally was supposed to be. He found some of his classmates who were talking amongst themselves as he just shrugged to himself about the situation. The morning continued on as he noticed that only girls were coming into his classroom, and he was starting to become worried that he was in the wrong class. It wasn't until the homeroom teacher of the class entered as it was revealed to be Vlad King as he walked through the doors. "Hello Class 1, I'm going to be the homeroom teacher for this class from this day forwards," the teacher said, as the class got excited about the man's presence. Alright, before we head out of the classroom in order to see the orientation that Nezu will be talking us through, I need to do a head count of the class. So when I call on your name, say here. The man said, as he started on the roll call. Every single female in the classroom had their name called one after the other as Izuku was beginning to feel like he was going to be singled out soon. Alright, and last but certainly not least, Midoriya Izuku. The teacher called out, as Izuku called himself out. You here. But I have a question, Vlad King Sensei. Izuku called out, as the man looked over at him. What is the question? He asked, back. Why am I the only male in this class? Izuku asked, as the man smirked at him. It was a little something that Bakugo Katsuki told us to do. We need to get these Jedi ways out of your brain. It's alright to have a relationship before you reach adulthood. Vlad King said, smiling evilly. Why, you're corrupting me from the lessons I was taught since I was a kid? Question mark. Kachan told you to do this. Izuku called out, stuttering. Yup. Now line up and head to the auditorium. You have a speech that will last 3 hours from Nezu coming up. Vlad King said, before they all heard an explosion from outside. What was that? One of the girls asked. That was Katsuki Bakugo. His quirk allows him to blow stuff up. Not that big of a deal, Izuku said, leaving the room at the head of the pack. 15. The class had waited in the auditorium for the principal to appear and give his speech, and they were completely tired after the first few minutes. Although Izuku was writing notes about everything the principal said, which got some of his classmates' attention at how attentive he was. Midoriya-san, you don't need to write this all down. A green vine-haired girl said, looking at the notes. I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything that the principal said. You never know when this might be important. Izuku said, offhandedly as he continued his note-taking. As the morning came and went, Nezu completely went off on a rant about how he would love to take over the world as Izuku continued to take notes on how the rodent would do so. He was completely surprised at how effective with him being in rule over the planet would actually become, and he put a hand into the air. Yes, Midoriya-kun, the principal asked, as Izuku stood up. Mr. Principal, I personally believe that with the evidence you accumulated just now about your world domination plans, you could actually become one of the best leaders to ever grace the presence of the earth. Izuku said, as the principal looked on at him in intrigue. What makes you think that, young man? Nezu asked, as he walked away from his podium and moved to where Izuku could see him clearly. Well, with all the plans you make, you could literally be the leader of a country or the world with all the problems that with a leader like you being in charge would take care of almost immediately. Izuku said, as Nezu nodded in order to get Izuku to continue. These are the notes that I've been taking on your lecture about world domination, and I couldn't help but be fascinated with how effective it could become in the future. Right now, nobody would be in the right mind to place you in a position of power like that, but in the near future it could be possible that it could outright happen. Izuku said, before going off on a tangent about how Nezu would actually be one of the best leaders the world had ever seen as well as will ever see, since he would find ways to keep himself from being assassinated and many other things. Come meet me after school today, Midoriya-kun, I would like to pick at your mind when the day is over. But I must get back to telling the school about the events of the future. Nezu said, as Izuku looked around and found that everyone was looking at him like he was literally insane. Oh, sorry for wasting the time of everyone else. Izuku said, bowing to the entirety of the auditorium. Don't worry about it, Midoriya-kun, just be sure to arrive at my office at the end of the day. I would love to have a cup of tea with you in order to see what your brain could come up with in terms of plans of world domination. Nezu said, as he chuckled over to the podium. The rest of the auditorium was now fearful of what would happen to the new kid since he had been agreeing to the principal's plans of world domination, as well as supporting of them. As soon as Izuku was walking into the lunchroom all on his own, he found himself at a table without anyone nearby. As he got to eating his food, he never noticed how there was a small group of people making their way to his table. He was so into eating his food that he never noticed how Bakugo as well as some students from both the boys' class and his own had sat down at his table. As soon as he was finished, he pulled out a notebook when he noticed that his table had some people sitting at it looking at him. What happened? Did I do something wrong? Izuku asked, as they all looked at him funny before looking away. One of the girls then chose to speak up at that moment in time to see what he would think. My name is Yaoyorozu Momo, and I would like to ask you why you agreed with Principal Nezu's world domination plans. The girl asked as Izuku then went into a rant about how the rodent should probably create a new government for the school to be its own country so that they don't have any issues with outside governments trying to vie for control over the school. Needless to say, Momo Yaoyorozu was happy with the results of her question but at the same time confused as to why a smart person like him wasn't in class 1A with Bakugo and the other boys. Soon enough the day was coming to an end. As classes were out early for the day, Izuku told Bakugo about who he was supposed to see before the end of the day as he walked over towards Principal Nezu's office. As soon as he entered the room, he found the principal sitting at his desk doing some kind of paperwork before looking up at him. Midoriya-kun, please sit down, Nezu said, as Izuku entered the room and sat down at the chair. Thank you for this opportunity, Principal Nezu-san, Izuku said, as the rodent smiled at him. Not to worry Midoriya-kun, not that there is any real reason to worry though. But I have to ask, and I can't stress this enough. Can you tell me what a Jedi is? Nezu asked, as Izuku looked at him confused. I was told by Mitsuki Bakugo that you were under oath by the Jedi Order, to not enter any kind of relationship and to have you placed into a class of women in order to get you to break that oath. Nezu said, as Izuku nodded. I never wanted to break the oath because it was the rule that my master told me when I was younger. He told me that anger can lead to hatred, and love can lead to suffering, and that the same goes for anger and hatred. Izuku said, as Nezu then looked at him concerned. What about you being happy? Couldn't you turn to the dark side of the Force by releasing too much power of being happy within your emotions? Nezu asked, as Izuku thought about it. I've never fallen to the dark side of the Force because of feeling the emotion of happiness. I asked Master Yoda about it when I was beginning, and he told me that because I am happy the Force won't allow it to consume me with the power of the dark side of the Force. Izuku explained as Nezu nodded. Did you know, Midoriya-kun, that you could be happy and in a relationship at the same time? Nezu asked, as Izuku stared at the rodent for a little while. Just because that works in theory, doesn't mean that at some point if I lose that relationship that I might fall to the dark side because of pain and regret. Izuku said, as he softly looked away from the principal. So nothing I can say will deter you from breaking your oaths? Nezu asked, as Izuku looked at him confused. I don't think so. I've never broken them before. But I have been thinking about creating a new order of Jedi, ones that can utilize the power of the dark side of the Force and still retain all the light within them. But at the same time, I have been thinking about if the hubris of the Jedi caused them to die off. Izuku said, as he stood up. Thank you for this meeting, Principal Sir. I would like to have another talk like this at some point in the future. Izuku said, getting more uncomfortable with the principal. No matter what, I will get you to drop your oath to your late master. He is long gone. You have nothing to worry about in terms of letting the feelings you harbored your entire childhood free from confinement. Nezu said, as Izuku nodded and left the room. Izuku was walking to school the next day. He had been thinking hard about the situation he was currently in. He was supposed to be completely in the light side of the Force, that was why he was a Jedi after all. But that wasn't what was on his mind at the moment. What was on his mind at the moment was the simple fact that everyone was attempting to get him to drop his oath of his Jedi ways in order to allow him to live his life without having to listen to his old master of Yoda. Izuku knew that the ways of the Jedi was not entirely bad, but at the same time, he was told many times over by Katsuki that it was the main reason why they were defeated and that the Sith had taken over the galaxy. Shaking his head at the notion, Izuku entered his classroom as he thought about how he would like to have his hero costume done. He already had the designs ready for creation and the support students just wanted to know what color he would like to have for them. So he had gone there and told them to make it great for stealth, since he wanted to be a special hero on Earth who was more into stealth than anything else. The day continued on for Izuku after that. He had done many lessons within the class that were just normal everyday schooling that made him remember that UA was still a high school now that he thought about it. But now it was time for his class's final class of the day. hero informatics, the one thing that told them how to become an even better hero. And from what he heard from Katsuki the other day, All Might was going to be teaching the class, and informed him to not hold the hero in high regard. He was still new to the whole teaching thing. And as soon as the hero himself entered the room, Izuku knew what he meant when the teacher was extremely over the top with his speech as well as his actions. Smiling to himself, Izuku walked over to his supply case where his hero suit was sitting inside of as he smiled down at it. This is the first move I have to becoming a Jedi Knight. I can only hope that Master Yoda is smiling upon me now. Izuku thought to himself as he smiled. In the boys' locker room, Izuku pulled open the case where his hero suit was located, and he couldn't be any happier about what it looked like. As much as the black clothing irked him about his past since he last saw Anakin wearing such dark clothing, he had a slight fear of something bad happening to him once he wore it. Shaking his head, he placed all black attire on his body as he found his lightsaber on the utility belt as he smiled down at it as he left it on his hip ready to be used for battle. He knew that he wouldn't need to use it against his classmates, but he didn't want to make them think that they weren't ready for a blade such as that. So he made sure that he wouldn't use it against them since it was an extremely dangerous weapon. As soon as the boys left the locker room, Izuku kept to himself and distanced himself from the other students so that he could meditate on his own. As All Might had started the lesson making it a heroes versus villains matchup, Izuku sighed as he hoped that he was on the hero team. Sadly, his luck ran out at that moment as he was placed on the villain team with Setsuna Tokage. She was a very prankster kind of girl who made Izuku look twice at her considering her playful demeanor towards his classmates. But since he was the first matchup for the day, he thought that he should delve into the dark side of the Force in order to show the other students what it means if he truly releases his emotions. But he really needed to make sure that his power wasn't felt over the Force, so he made sure to mask it with a technique he learned in isolation. As soon as he and Tokage had managed to hide the bomb, he placed the same masking technique he learned from his master over the bomb so that the heroes wouldn't be capable of finding it. "So what's the plan, short stuff?" Setsuna asked, as she loomed over Izuku. "Well, who are the people we are up against?" "Sorry, I was too busy meditating before I heard that we were up first," Izuku asked, as Setsuna nodded. "The first ones we're up against are Nirageki Shota. He has a quirk where he can turn anything he touches into mud, and he can fall into it without any kind of trouble. But the real threat is Kendo. She has martial arts skills and can definitely show them off. Her quirk allows her to increase the volume of muscle in her hands that increase their size, making the damage she could do massive," Setsuna said, as Izuku nodded. "Well then, I guess it will be the first time you all see me using this side of the Force. I can only hope that you all don't hate it. As much as I don't like using it, my master taught me how to control it back on Coruscant in order to keep myself from falling," Izuku said, as he started to breathe deeply before Setsuna watched his face, and as soon as Izuku's eyes opened up, gone were the emerald green eyes she surprisingly liked, and they were replaced with orange-yellow eyes. "With this, I am now a villain. My name is Darth Midra and I am going to defeat the Jedi scum," Izuku said, as he walked out of the room. The aura he had been releasing into the room had caused Setsuna to be completely filled with fear as she watched the young man leave the room. As soon as his massive presence had disappeared and entered the hall, Setsuna called on to All Might to keep an eye on Izuku. She didn't wish for her classmate to fall down into what she heard him state was called the dark side. Izuku walked through the hallways of the building where they were doing their lesson. Izuku had been searching for the first floor since he wanted to make sure that he could find the heroes as fast as possible. He also had manipulated his clothing attire to create a cape for himself since he thought that it was a great aesthetic to have for a Sith. As soon as he entered the third floor of the building, he had met up with Kendo as well as Shota as they saw him immediately. "Give up, villain. Tell us where the bomb is, and we will make sure that you are taken in without harm," Kendo called out, getting into a combat stance, Shota doing the same. "I am Darth Midra, and I am here to defeat you hero scum, and you will never get the words out of my mouth. For today, you are all going to die down here," Izuku said, as he pulled his mask down. As soon as those words were released into the hallway, Izuku released his killer intent upon them as they looked at Izuku in slight fear but held strong as they charged at him. Izuku used only the Force in order to keep them away. His plan was extremely simple: Don't let them get too close, and make sure that Shota doesn't touch the floor. And like that, the battle had started. Izuku wasn't using his lightsaber because he didn't wish to hurt them more than he could without it. He was trained by the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. He was powerful enough to take these two with his eyes blindfolded with just the light side of the Force. But he wanted to show them what happens when he delves into the dark side of the Force. When he decided to open his heart and mind to all the pain and suffering he felt at the loss of his master. So this fight was anything but one-sided. Kendo as well as Shota did their very best in order to create plan after plan in order to defeat Izuku. Teaming up on him was their last chance as of now. The entire room they were inside of had been completely turned into a battlefield on the same likes of the Vietnam War. Izuku was still standing on the side where he was holding off Kendo with her palm strikes as well as kicks trying to throw him off balance, and Izuku was countering with his power as well as his own martial arts. Just because you know how to fight doesn't mean that you've witnessed a war happen. Trust me, I know how to create plans and work through them, Izuku said, as he force-pushed Kendo into Shota. As soon as both students fell to the ground in pain, they got back up as they both glared at Izuku, but that was when something weird happened to them. They felt something grabbing their throat and dropped their combat stances before feeling themselves being pulled over towards Izuku. As soon as they were right in front of him, they found his face looking at them with indifference as he stared at them. This is the power of the dark side of the Force, and it is the main reason that I don't prefer to use it. It plagues the mind with a want for more power, and I don't need it since I'm strong enough as is. I would rather not kill you all because that is what these powers wants, no desires. This battle is over, Izuku said, as he threw them across the room as they landed on the wall. Izuku walked over to them both and saw that they were trying to get back up, so he sighed and placed his fingers in their direction, and as soon as they stood back up, they felt increasing pain as if electricity was coursing through their bodies. Their screams were heard on the intercoms of the building as All Might screamed into Izuku's ear. "Young Midoriya, you need to stop this at once, you'll kill them," All Might screamed as Izuku immediately stopped what he was doing. As the students watched as Izuku delved into the dark side of the Force that he talked to them about a few days prior, they were now seeing how powerful he could be if he was a real villain. He was making them fear as if their lives were merely nothing in the palm of his hand, especially since he managed to take down Kendo and Shota, a recommendation student and their class president, as if it was nothing on his own. But there was something about the look on his face as it began to smile at the two downed hero students when he sent torrents of electricity into their bodies. It was almost as if he enjoyed dealing out pain to them. It was here that they realized that Izuku being on the light side of the Force, as he said it, was a really good thing for them. If he ever decided that being on the light side of the Force was a horrible thing to do, they wouldn't stand a chance. But then, young Midoriya, if you continue to do that they could die. Stop this at once, All Might called out, and as soon as All Might said those words, Izuku exited his trance-like state before his eyes blinked and his eyes returned to their emerald color. On the recording they could not hear what Izuku said, but there was one student who saw the look on his face and immediately read what his lips said. "What have I done? I'm a monster," before the boy left the room to hide himself from everyone and his partner. This is the main problem with having someone who is not from our culture, everyone. They have their own issues, and it will be up to them in order to learn how to fully control their power. Young Midoriya is one such person. He must learn how to make sure that he doesn't dish out enough pain as well as power to kill someone. Since he doesn't have a quirk, it could easily be stated that this Force ability he has is a quirk in and of itself. Remember that no matter what kind of quirk you have, you could still kill someone with it, All Might said, as the students of the trial had entered the building with the sole exception of Izuku. It wasn't until a few trials later that Izuku returned to the rest of the class looking like he'd seen a ghost, and he kept himself as far away from the others as possible. He didn't want to hear them talk about how he was looking exactly like a villain. He didn't want to be near anyone who could make him feel like he was a complete bastard. And soon enough Izuku was now in the lunchroom after the final class of the day had passed, and Izuku was sitting on his own at a table with nobody at it. He really didn't wish to have anyone near him at the moment because of the simple fact that he was too scared to be around anyone without the dark side getting the better of him again. As he was eating his katsudon, he never noticed how 3 girls in particular had noticed his sad looks and decided to move over to his table. Izuku saw the looks of the classmates of his that weren't even looking on the side of a good thing, since they took one look at him before grimacing and looking away from him. It was here that Izuku knew that he would be ostracized from his classmates, and he would keep them away from himself. And as he continued to eat his lunch, he heard 3 smacks of a tray hitting the table near him, and as soon as he looked up with his eyes they nearly bugged out as he saw 3 girls sitting near him. "Hello there. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu, and I couldn't help but notice how you were eating your lunch all alone. Can you tell me your name?" Yaoyorozu asked, kindly. "My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I am eating alone because of something that happened during class," Izuku said, as the other 2 girls nodded. "That happens sometimes. Something bad happens during class and you just want to give your classmates some space to think about something." "I get it. Oh, by the way, my name is Ochako Uraraka." "Nice to meet you, Izuku," Ochako said, as Izuku nodded. "My name is Toru Hagakuri, and I can only hope that we become the best of friends," the last girl said, as her invisible body had made Izuku look at her a bit harder to make out if he could really see her or not. "It's nice to meet you all, but why are you all eating at this table with me? Don't you all have other friends that you'd rather talk and eat with?" Izuku asked, as he heard someone else coming over. "Geez Izu, why the hell are you asking beautiful girls why they want to sit next to you? They just want to learn about you and maybe get into your pants or something," Katsuki said, as he slapped Izuku's head. "We are most definitely not," Momo said, as he glared at Katsuki. "Don't worry about Kachan, he is just that way with everyone. Almost reminds me about a certain classmate of mine that is a prankster," Izuku said, as Katsuki laughed. "I can't wait to meet them," Katsuki said, as the group ate their food in silence. As the food was being eaten in silence, Izuku was not knowledgeable about what would be happening during the week since he knew that there was a disturbance in the force the other day. But he had no clue about what would be happening the next day, and he would have to be ready for the future events that will happen. Because not even on Earth is someone like him safe from the fealty that is the dark side. Izuku was seen in class after lunch as he was meditating in class as he made sure the force wrote down everything he needed for the afternoon classes. He had been deep in his meditation when he noticed a massive shift in the force, one where he could feel the light return back to normal as well as the balance return with the massive darkness that was placed upon the galaxy. It was here that Izuku was paying close attention to the battle that was taking place a few minutes before the shift. He listened in as he meditated as he felt that there was 2 forces battling one another out in the deeper portions of space as he then got brief glimpses of the battle. A massive man in black armor and a black cape as his face was obscured by a big black helmet that made his intimidation factor massive compared to the person he was fighting. Izuku watched on as the younger of the 2 fighters battled it out with him as it was revealed that he was stronger than the armored individual. Izuku had taken notice about how the armored individual's force energy was similar to Anakin Skywalker, back when the Empire had begun to take over the galaxy. He then noticed the person where the darkness that encompassed the entire galaxy had originated from. A disfigured man who looked eerily similar to Chancellor Palpatine, and as soon as Izuku gained a brief glimpse of the man, he turned to look at Izuku with a smile on his face. "So you are the one who has been keeping an eye on me. Jedi," the man said, as Izuku lost connection with the Force in that moment as he was tossed from his seat and smacked right into the wall behind the classroom. As soon as this happened though, everyone in the classroom had taken notice of Izuku being thrown from his seat as they ran to make sure he was all right. Even Midnight, their teacher for Hero Modern Art History, had run over to check on him. "Are you all right, Midoriya?" Kendo called out, as she reached to grab Izuku's hand. As soon as their hands touched one another, Izuku shivered as he felt extremely cold to her. "Midnight-sensei, we need to get Midoriya to Recovery Girl," Kendo called out as Midnight moved and picked the boy up. "Don't worry, Class 1 will make sure that he gets there safely," she said, as she left the room with Izuku in tow. Once inside the nurse's office, Recovery Girl noticed how pale as well as cold Izuku was as she started to warm him up. "What happened, young man? Did something happen to make you this cold as well as pale?" the old woman asked as Izuku shivered in the bed. I was meditating in class when I noticed ASS shift into the force. I looked at a big battle, and then someone noticed me. Izuku said, as Midnight became alarmed. Who was it? She asked, as she felt Izuku's forehead. The cold from his forehead had increased in heat as he slowly regained his breath as he paled even further as he uttered a single name. See Chancellor P. Palpatine, Izuku muttered, as both became slightly concerned. Who is Chancellor Palpatine? Recovery Girl asked, as Izuku explained. Palpatine was a senator who became the Chancellor of the Republic when I was on Coruscant training with Grandmaster Yoda. He had been around since the start of the Separatist War between the Outer Rim allies and the Republic. He caused the war between both places and played both sides, and single-handedly caused the demise of all Jedi in the galaxy. I think he noticed my PR presence within my meditative state and found it near them. He must never come here. If he does, he will make sure that anyone and everyone will become Sith, or he will dominate them through politics. Izuku warned as Midnight asked another question. What else did you see whilst meditating? She asked, as Izuku shook his head. I think I saw Anakin Skywalker fighting someone. At least I think I saw Anakin fighting someone. His power within the Force was massive and he was able to fight him to a standstill. I can only hope that the young Jedi who was fighting Anakin had survived. Izuku said, as Recovery Girl pushed him to lay down. Make sure that if you meditate like that again that you don't get caught like that. It could have disastrous effects for our planet if you are found out. Recovery Girl said, as Izuku nodded before passing out. This is something very dangerous, Chio. We need to inform Nezu about this development. Midnight said, as Chio nodded. We must get his attention after school. Only then will we have him be preparing for something from out of our world. Chio said, as a few hours after their conversation with Izuku the boy was allowed to leave the school. With him gone and heading home with Bakugo, Recovery Girl and Midnight moved towards Nezu's office as they walked through the halls. As they made their way through the school's halls, they ran into Aizawa who had been nearby making his last rounds before finding them. What happened? You both are pale as a ghost. Can you tell me what happened? Aizawa asked, as he walked with them. You should probably make sure that you never tell anyone what we inform you about when we arrive at Nezu's office. Midnight said, as the man nodded. Few minutes had passed as they finally arrived at Nezu's personal office, and as soon as they entered the room, they found Nezu at his computer as he looked through personal records about everything. Achio and Kayama-san, as well as Aizawa-san. How can I help you all today? Nezu asked, as Recovery Girl and Midnight sat down at the chairs nearby. We need to inform you about what happened in Nimari's classroom today. Chio said, as Nezu grimly nodded. From what I know the boy likes to use the Force, as he calls it, whenever he wishes. And during his meditation as he would say, something happened during it that caused him to be launched from the classroom. Nezu asked, as Chio nodded. From what I noticed, there was a dark cloud over the boy all day. It seemed like he had something on his mind ever since he first arrived at school today. Nezu said, as he pulled up some camera footage. But that isn't all, Principal. He was doing his meditation today and he was seeing glimpses of a fight happening out in the furthest portions of the galaxy. And he found that the man who was in charge of the darkness that he said covered the galaxy had taken notice of his presence in the area. And before long launched him out of his meditative state and crashed into the wall of my classroom. Can you inform us what that means? Midnight asked, as Nezu placed his paw on his chin. From what we had gathered from the entire place of which he came from, he was trained in the arts of a Jedi warrior, someone who was trained to be a peacekeeper. And he wishes to show others how to become a Jedi like himself in the future. That can only mean that our world is a whole lot smaller than we believe it to be. We need to get our spacecraft out into the vast universe in order to see what we can find. Nezu said, as he glowered at the footage of Izuku looking pale as a ghost. Because if what I think is correct, whoever saw Midoriya watching him, can only now know of our location within the galaxy. We need to prepare for an invasion of the highest authority, and we need to prepare for when we are invaded by alien interference. Nezu said, as everyone nodded and left the room. As soon as they were gone though, Nezu thought about Izuku's condition after the presence of that new person in his school had appeared. I wonder, how did you send your ghost over here so fast? Nezu mumbled to himself. At home Izuku was sleeping in his bed. It was around 8 p.m. and he wanted to get as much sleep as possible since Class 1A and 1B were going to be having a joint training session with one another. Especially since they were going to be having a talk of sorts in order to make sure that their rivalry will be purely healthy and not unhealthy. But as Izuku began to continue to sleep, nightmares started to plague them as an old man's laughter was heard about the dream as he watched others he knew or just met be killed in front of him as the man himself, as he continued to laugh, looked at him with pity. The galaxy thinks it has gotten rid of me, but that isn't further from the truth. I am on a planet nearby where I supposedly died, and I will await until I am reborn as a true embodiment of the Sith. And you will be the first I will find and destroy Jedi scum. Palpatine called out as Izuku's body moved slightly in his dream state. Izuku glared hard at the old Sith as he started to regain control of his dreams, and as soon as he looked at Palpatine, he started to smile at him. There was one thing that my master told me, Palpatine. It is that no matter how long the Sith will reign, something will happen to balance the Force. You will never win, you will win a battle, but never the war. Izuku said, as he forced Palpatine out of his dreams. It was now morning as Izuku woke up from his slumber. His talk with Palpatine was very harsh as well as tiring. But he needed to have some energy within him so he could go to class that day, especially since they were going on a field trip that day to somewhere on campus. As soon as he left his bedroom with a serious case of bedhead, Katsuki was walking around the corner as he saw the bags under Izuku's eyes. Not much sleep, nerd? He asked, as Izuku nodded. Palpatine talked to me in my sleep last night, tried to get me to see nightmares. I think he was trying to get me to fall to the dark side again after I first showed it to my classmates. Izuku said, as Katsuki nodded along. Well, at least they know how powerful you really are. Are you still being treated like a villain amongst them, by the way? He asked, as Izuku shook his head. I think the villainous attitude I had on the training day 2 days ago is now wearing off. But they are still keeping their distance. Izuku said, as Katsuki groaned. I swear they can't even take a training session lightly, can they? Katsuki asked, as Izuku shrugged. It may have been a training exercise, but I nearly killed some of my classmates' Kachan. I can only hope that it will get better from here on out, but if it doesn't, I will only hope that I can be transferred into your class. Izuku said, as he yawned. The two ate their breakfast with one another as they talked about their training and left the home in order to head to school. As they talked to one another, they ran into a couple of other students who were from Katsuki's class as they began to have their own conversation. Izuku felt like he belonged in this class, and the more he hung out with them on the walk, the more he felt like he was being outcasted by his classmates. He didn't have anything against them, but they weren't talking to him, nor were they even trying to be friends with him. It was worse than it was in middle school, where everyone was just simply too furious about him becoming a hero without a quirk of his own to use. Since he couldn't become friends with his classmates, he was starting to feel lonely as he was only looked out for because he was a classmate. Both classes made it to their respective classrooms as their teachers informed them about the field trip that they were going to make in order to work together in a rescue training session. When all of the students had arrived at the buses, Izuku was wearing his hero costume, which was his Jedi robes that he wore all the time during training. He had made them extra baggy so that they would hide his natural physique he gained in training with Katsuki as well as his master. Izuku was sitting on his own in his own bus with his class as they were animatedly talking to one another. Izuku wasn't really close with anyone in his class since they more or less feared him than they did like him. Izuku sighed to himself as he heard them all conversing with one another, and he decided to meditate to himself to calm his lonely heart that only wanted to have some kind of attention as well as friends. Whilst this was happening, the class around him started to talk about him as well as his powers. So what do you think he's doing now? From what it looks like, he's meditating at the moment. Kendo asked, as they all looked at one another. They had managed to figure out that from what they could see, Izuku would tunnel vision whenever he meditated and wouldn't hear them talk. Well, it seems like he's trying to calm himself down from the issue that happened yesterday. Even I had never thought that he'd be thrown from his seat during meditation. Shishida said, as he looked at Izuku with a slight fear in his tone of voice. Hey, are you all still mad that he won the exercise 2 days ago by entering the dark side of the Force, as he calls it? I swear none of you know what it's truly like to be under that kind of aura. Setsuna said, as she shivered slightly. What are you talking about, Setsuna? We had to fight him. Kendo said, as she glared at the girl. Well, I had to deal with him standing in the same room as me with nothing but his intimidating aura. And I got to say that he was incredibly intimidating. It scared me to believe that if I did one thing wrong, I would die there. Setsuna said, as she shivered more. Well, at least you didn't have to fight him. He was like a wild animal. He fought us like he was a cornered animal, and then he managed to start choking us with just a handheld gesture. Kendo said, as Shota looked over at them both. Well, at least you weren't choking in the air the entire time of the fight. We couldn't even get him to ignite his lightsaber, Shota said, as he glared at Izuku. He didn't even take you guys seriously. Kanoko Komori asked, worriedly. If you all are trying to say that your classmate didn't take you seriously, then you are all flat wrong. Vlad King said, as he glared at his students. What do you mean, Vlad-sensei? Kendo asked, as Vlad looked at his students with a stern glare. Young Midoriya didn't attack you both with his lightsaber at all because of one singular reason. It was too dangerous to use on you all. He was making sure that he never used it, because with one slice of that weapon and your career is over. Vlad said, as they all noticed Izuku looking pained now, as he was not in his meditative state anymore. Just because you all think that I am evil at heart, doesn't mean you should judge a book by its cover. I will ask to be placed in Class 1A at the end of this week. Izuku said, as Vlad nodded his head. It was here though that the buses had arrived at a large dome of glass, as there was someone slowly coming out of the building with a big baggy astronaut suit. Once both classes were able to get their students off their respective buses, they all stood next to one another as they listened to their teachers. Hello students, and welcome to what I've dubbed as the USJ. 13 called out from her position at the top of the stairs outside of the building. Oh wow, it's like the building Universal Studios Japan. A blonde-haired boy with a black lightning bolt in his hair called out. Sorry young man, but that isn't what the abbreviation is for. This is what I'd call the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. A place where you all can learn how to use your quirks as well as powers in order to save a person's life. A few days ago, you all learned how to fight one another with your quirks, as well as how dangerous it can be to use them against one another. But in this class, you will learn how to utilize your quirks in order to save the lives of the civilians you will be protecting. I can certainly hope you all are prepared for this class today, since it will take up all your lessons for the day. 13 said, as everyone looked at one another except for Izuku as he placed himself within the confines of Class 1A's students. Entering the USJ was like something you could ever see. Izuku could see the many different biomes within the place where they will find their issues in the world. Izuku was more specifically attuned to the area where there was a multitude of rocks as well as mud, as he smiled to himself. As soon as the class were getting prepared for their lesson, the lights in the building started to flicker around as they all looked at the main plaza, as a massive purple vortex had appeared as the teachers had moved to the front of the classes. What is that? A red-haired boy called out, as Izuku looked down as well. He felt the multiple massive energies of the force that were deep into the dark side of it, and he shivered slightly as he glared at the villains. Whoever those are, they are real villains. Their energies are reading as if they're in the dark side of the force. Izuku said, as Katsuki looked over at Izuku. Well, if they're villains, then we can show them how much training that we've done. Katsuki said, as he grinned madly as he glared at the villains. Stay back, those are real villains. Vlad will come with me. 13 Keep the children safe and evacuate them all the way towards the buses. Aizawa said, as he led the heroes to their respective locations. As a hand pulled apart the vortex at the bottom of the stairs as Aizawa and Vlad ran down, as many villains attacked, Vlad asked Aizawa a question. If we survive this mess, would you like to take my student into your class in exchange, or one of yours? Vlad asked, as both teachers attacked their respective opponents. Who would I trade for Midoriya, huh? Aizawa asked, as he thought about his students. Well, I could give up Mineta. He has been causing a ruckus in my classroom for a while now. Want to switch him out? Aizawa asked, as Vlad looked at him. Isn't he the perverted one? As he used his blood to smack a villain of his own. Yeah, the girls of my classroom don't really like him. I'm giving him to you so that your class can try and cause him to lose his perversion, or you could expel him for me," Aizawa said, using his capture weapon to toss another villain away. "You got yourself a deal. If we survive this, we will inform Nezu about our choices," Vlad said, as both heroes continued their fight against the villains. As soon as the villains lost Aizawa's attention, the smoke villain disappeared from view, causing Aizawa to curse in anger at losing the villain from his view. As soon as the villain appeared in front of the class as they were escaping, he smiled down at them from within his purple cloud as he spoke. "Hello there, we are the League of Villains. And we have come here to bring the symbol of peace to meet his end. And we have just the means to do so," the villain said, as his eyes glowed ominously. With the teachers distracted by the villains, Izuku felt the power within the force within this group of villains as he looked at the one in front of himself. The wispy villain had managed to take down 13 as Izuku kept himself out of view from the villain himself as he felt the conflicting energies within it. Opening his eyes, he found himself being placed inside of a portal as he fell through it and towards the other end of said portal. The last thing he heard from the villain was that they will be scattered and murdered within their place of safety. When Izuku fell from the portal, he never thought that he would reappear in front of two young women in the landslide zone as he looked at his opponents standing across from them. "Momo, what is the situation?" Izuku asked, entering his commander mentality whenever he was in the Clone Wars. "There is about 50 villains surrounding us, we need backup now," Momo called out, as Izuku moved forward. "I apologize in advance, but you need to move back, Momo," Izuku said, as both girls knew what was about to happen as Izuku stepped in front of them. They watched with a bated breath as he pulled out his lightsaber as he stared at his opponents. There were multiple opponents who had mutation quirks, emitter quirks, as well as transformation quirks. "What do you think you can do against all of us? You are only one person," one of the villains called out as Izuku looked at the numbers of villains surrounding himself. 1 versus about 59 villains. "I like those odds," Izuku said, as he ignited his lightsaber as he launched towards them with a twirling spin as he cut down some of the villains. He only went for dismemberment of the hands as well as arms, and only went for a leg if the villains came too close. But overall, he was making short work of the villains until one of them decided to show up behind himself and start throwing electricity on his back. As he was sent to the ground, Izuku slowly stood back up as he used his hands to stop the electricity from entering his body and burning him from the inside out. He felt that this person's electricity was on par with Sith lightning, but he knew that it wasn't even close. Sith lightning burned much worse than this one. So as he pushed back the electricity, the villain looked shocked, no pun intended, as his attack was nullified as well as sent back towards him. As the attack sent him flying backwards into a tree, Izuku walked over to his downed lightsaber before using telekinesis in order to pull it back to him as he ignited it again. The villain from before had appeared again as he ran towards Izuku, thinking about using hand-to-hand combat in order to take the young man down. But almost as soon as he got close to Izuku, the young man used a mind trick on him in order to get him to knock himself out. "All the children are dead, knock yourself out," Izuku said, waving a hand in front of the villain. "All of the children are dead, I will knock myself out now," the villain said, before smashing his head with a large log, causing him to fall to the ground. Looking over at Momo and Jiro, he found them looking at him with a shocked expression as they ran over to him. Momo and Jiro couldn't understand what in the world had happened. Izuku had attacked the villains with such grace as well as beauty that it seemed like he was dancing. He had used his fighting form of Ataru in order to take down his opponents as fast as possible whilst also switching over to Form 3, Sorazu, in order to be defensive. The movements he made were precise as well as perfect as he took down each and every villain in their zone. Even the electrical villain who had appeared to fight him had been taken down with near ease. They were now walking with the boy as he kept his hand out away from his body as he felt for enemies entering their range. As soon as they were within range of the steps, they soon found that the villains in the main plaza were defeated except for a villain with hands all over his body who was fighting their teacher. "Momo, Jiro, you both need to get to the top of the steps in order to be sure that our classmates are safe. I will stay with Aizawa-sensei in order to prevent him from dying. He may be an ass sometimes, but we still need him to teach us," Izuku said, as he ignited his lightsaber, twirling it around a couple times before taking off towards the fight. As both girls nodded to one another, they found Suyu as well as Mineta in the water nearby and pulled them away from the area and up the stairs in order to get them all to safety. With Izuku and Aizawa, the two were fighting the hand villain together, although one was reluctant to allow Izuku into the fight because it was too dangerous for him. "For the last time, Midoriya, I don't need you here. You could get killed," Aizawa said, dodging a strike from their foe. "Master, for the last time, you don't have enough stamina to keep going. You will die if you keep doing this to yourself," Izuku said, unaware of the fact he called Aizawa his master. Aizawa was a bit perturbed by the slip-up from Midoriya since the boy had yet to mention anything about his Jedi roots, but he was surprised when the boy called him master. But this surprise allowed their foe to land a hand on his elbow, causing it to disintegrate all the way down to the muscle before Izuku nearly sliced off the man's hand. He did clip the young villain in the shoulder with another swipe as they attempted to flee from the blade. "That blade is dangerous. Are you sure you don't wish to become a villain?" The villain, Tamura Shigaraki, his mind told him, asked condescendingly. "I am Midoriya Izuku, Jedi Knight of the Fallen Jedi Order. And I will always and forever be a peacekeeper," Izuku yelled out, as he kept his determination on his opponent and attacked relentlessly with Form 7 of the lightsaber combat lessons, Juyo, he learned under Yoda. It allowed him to channel all of the power of the dark side of the Force he could use in order to attack relentlessly without flaws to take their defense down little by little. As soon as Izuku was about to strike Tamura down, the young villain had called out for help as a massive being stood in front of Izuku's slicing weapon. As soon as Izuku made a downward swipe of his blade, he found that he didn't cut down the villain he was against, but it was a villain who was utterly massive. Looking up at the creature, he found it was sliding off of its own body as it fell at an angle before landing on the ground. Looking at the creature, Izuku watched as it tried its best to keep itself standing, as well as from what he could see of small cells from the creature's blood coagulating out of itself trying to regenerate. "Foolish hero. My Nomu can heal Rom any attack that you can dish out. There is no way you can win," Tamura called out, as Izuku watched as the creature tried as hard as it could to regain its form again, only to fail. Izuku sighed in sadness as he felt like the person who used to be what this Nomu was begged for some release of its horrible life. Placing his lightsaber right where the brain of the creature was, he ignited the blade as he gave a somber look at the creature's eyes as it stared at him back. As soon as the eyes became glazed over the villain, Tamura Shigaraki looked on in horror as his creature was defeated without much fanfare. How did you kill my Nomu? It was supposed to be as powerful as All Might. It could have killed All Might on its own," the young villain cried out, throwing a tantrum. Are you seriously throwing a tantrum about the loss of someone on your side? If he was seriously capable of killing All Might, then I am seriously glad that I just managed to counter some of its capabilities with my lightsaber," Izuku said, as he pointed the blade at his opponent. Pulling the blade back, he ignited it once more as he moved towards the villain as the mist villain appeared again. "I apologize for my long-awaited arrival, Master Shigaraki. But it seems like one of the children escaped with their lives," the villain said, as he looked at the defeated Nomu on the ground. "Damn it, it's all over. Let's go, we need to think about a new plan," Shigaraki Tamura said, as the mist villain started up a portal. Unaware of the fact that Izuku was coming up behind them both, Izuku swung his blade sideways in order to try and take both of them down without a second thought, when he found that they had managed to escape into the portal, but they didn't escape unscathed. Izuku watched as one of the villain's hands had fallen to the ground just before the portal closed as he stood upright. Taking a knee from all the things that were happening, Aizawa moved over to the young man in order to check for injuries. "Are you all right, problem child?" Aizawa asked, as Izuku nodded as he tried to stand up before passing out on the spot. "How long were you awake, problem child?" Aizawa asked, as he placed the young man on his back. Kirishima and Bakugo had managed to clear their area of villains as they had been all alone in their zone with villains. They had managed to clear the whole area because of the fact that Bakugo was a battle maniac as he took down villain after villain before they arrived at the plaza and found Aizawa walking up the stairs in order to get Izuku away from the area. The other students from around the place had arrived as well as they had scuffs as well as bruises on their bodies, but they were ultimately safe and sound. Ochako had seen Aizawa bringing Izuku up the stairs as he had carried the unconscious boy towards the girl as she fretted over him. "Don't worry Uraraka, he's fine. Just unconscious, that is all he is suffering from. I think he didn't get enough sleep last night," Aizawa said, as Ochako continued to fret over the boy as he walked over to 13. "Yaoyorozu, how is 13? Aizawa asked, as the girl gave her report. "Sir, 13 has been injured severely. She needs medical attention as fast as possible," Momo said, as Aizawa nodded. It wasn't much longer before the rest of the class had returned in the USJ's entrance as they got themselves under control as their emotions came out once more. They had been attacked by villains in their first week of school. If that didn't say anything about their situation, some of them had suffered from near-death experiences that could have killed them. They would need a lot of therapy if they continued on this way. Izuku though seemed to be held back by his Jedi ways. He had been more merciful of enemies since they didn't try and outright kill others, but he did kill the Nomu as that would make him feel something. At least, Aizawa hopes it does. Because if it doesn't have Izuku feeling something wrong, then the Jedi he worked for had probably had him bottled up his emotions from being released. As soon as the teachers as well as police and All Might arrived in the USJ, they had taken entries from the students as well as Aizawa about what had happened. All Might had even asked Aizawa what had happened while he was back at Ua resting, and Aizawa went off on the man. Never before had anyone seen another hero scolding All Might like Aizawa had that day, and they also could see why the man was calling All Might out. "You were a teacher, All Might. You were supposed to be there for your students. Why were you saving people before class? There are other heroes in the area for a reason," Aizawa yelled at All Might. "Well, I couldn't exactly leave someone needing help." All Might tried to reason as Aizawa held the man's hero suit by the collar. "So you would rather leave your students to die, over saving someone where there were at least 17 different heroes at?" Aizawa asked, as All Might stared into the man's eyes. "What is this really about, Aizawa-san?" All Might asked, now looking more serious. "You didn't see what I did. I had to watch as one of my students had to kill their opponent since it couldn't die. All the while you were sitting pretty in your office. You have students to teach, god damn it. If you don't want to teach them anything, why are you even here?" Aizawa said, as he walked away with fury etched into his eyes. "He's right, you know," a young voice came from behind All Might. Looking down he found Izuku, who had fully regained consciousness. "Young Midoriya, how are you doing?" All Might asked, as Izuku sighed. "I'm fine as of right now, but I would have been better if you were there protecting all of us when we really needed it," Izuku said, as he sighed again. "Well, I apologize for not being there. I was not able to reach you all in time. I had no idea that you were all being attacked until young Iida had found me in the principal's office," All Might said, as Izuku looked at All Might again. "I know that being the #1 hero is kind of difficult, All Might, but can you please just make sure that your time is better spent on protecting as well as guiding us to become better heroes than we were yesterday?" Izuku asked, as he got up and walked over to Katsuki and the others. All Might watched as the young man walked away as he thought about his actions towards Class 1A as well as how he had been training young Tagata with his quirk. "I need to seriously think about my problems as well as make sure that I don't have to save people without getting in the way. There are heroes out there that won't need my help all the time. But I just can't help it when someone calls out for help. I must save them from any and all harm," All Might said, mostly to himself as Izuku stopped in his tracks. "If you worry too much about the innocents outside of a hero school, then why are you even a teacher, All Might?" Izuku said, as he left the man to his thoughts. As Izuku walked away, he never thought about the weight of the issues he would be placing on All Might as the man was left stumped about Izuku's question. The man had come to Ua to find a successor, and he did find them in young Tagata, but for some reason, One for All was resonating with this young man, as if it wanted him to be the next user of One for All. "I wonder what would have happened had you had One for All, young Midoriya," All Might mumbled to himself as he walked away from the USJ to think about his reasons for becoming a teacher as Ua. Izuku paced around his room as he thought about the way he killed the Nomu in the USJ. he had bisected the creature before feeling through the force that it wasn't alive per se, just suffering. So him mercy killing it was completely just him trying to end its suffering, but he couldn't just think about it that way. He had always hated when he had to kill an opponent. It made him think that they were just too far gone and away from the light that he couldn't save them from themselves. Shaking his head, he left his bedroom and sat down at the table where the other Bakugo family members were eating their dinner as they looked at his arrival. "Hey there, Squirt. I'm sorry that you had to go through something like what happened at the USJ. If you don't wish to talk about it, how about you tell us stories from your Jedi days within the Jedi Temple on Coruscant?" Mitsuki asked, as she smiled at him. As Izuku took her up on her offer, he talked about how he and the other younglings had been training as well as how Master Yoda had been as a master for him. Talking about the war effort against the Separatists, and Emperor Palpatine, before he became known as the Dark Lord of the Sith Sidious. It wasn't much longer that dinner was over and Izuku moved into his bedroom in order to get some sleep. His class had the next couple days off before coming back on Monday in order to restart up on classes again. Once he was in the middle of sleep, he found himself conversing with a weird blue ghost of his master in his dream world as they sat down in a seat within the Jedi Temple. "Good it is to see you, young Midoriya," Master Yoda said, as his way of talking was bringing a smile to Izuku's face. "The same to you, Master. What is the reason of your visit? I know that you aren't with the realm of the living anymore," Izuku asked, as he leaned forwards as Yoda gained a happy smile. "Grateful I am for your trust, young Midoriya. But terrible news I must bring. The Dark Lord of the Sith searches for worthy Jedi to corrupt your heart. You must keep away from the dark side of the Force. Darth Sidious searches a new apprentice, he is," Yoda said, as Izuku looked at him confusedly. "Didn't Darth Vader kill him? Or was it his son?" Izuku asked, as Yoda gained a pained smile. "Survived, Sidious did. Reincarnation he did. A new apprentice he is in search of, since you he will," Yoda said, as Izuku nodded. "I will hide myself within the Force. Thank you for the warning, Master. Was there anything else you wished to teach me?" Izuku asked, as Yoda smiled once again. "Training, for another time. Wake up, you must," Yoda said, as Izuku's dream world collapsed as he heard terrible laughing in the background. Waking up from his dream slowly, Izuku looked around his room only to find it dark as can be. Turning on the light of his room, he found an old man looking at him weirdly. Pulling his lightsaber out and pointing it at the man, Izuku got into a defensive stance. He knew who this old man was. It was Sidious, and it seemed like he was trying to gain control of him somehow. "What are you doing here, Sidious?" Izuku growled out, as he swung his blade at the severely confused Sith. "I have come here in search of a new apprentice, and you have just the power needed to become it," Sidious said, as he stared at Izuku with an unfocused gaze. "You're not here physically, and I will not become your apprentice. I already saw what happens when someone becomes your apprentice with Jedi Knight Skywalker. You turned him against his friends and family. I will not do the same thing, nor will I fall for the same things that you place in my mind," Izuku said, as the Sith angrily glared at him. "If you do not become my apprentice, you will not be capable of saving the ones you love, nor those you will soon come to love," Sidious said, as Izuku glared harder at him. "I have not fallen for anyone yet, yes. But I do not need your help in keeping them safe. They can take care of themselves just fine on their own. I do not need to be there 24/7, Izuku said, using his power within the Force to send the projection of Sidious away from his room as it gained light from the rising sun outside his room window. Once the oppressive power of the dark side had slowly ebbed away from his room, Izuku stumbled out of it as he moved to the bathroom. Placing his face above the toilet in the bathroom, he threw up everything he had for dinner the previous night. But as soon as he looked into the toilet, he found that there was blood in the toilet instead. Shaking his head, he noticed that it wasn't blood like he thought it was. "Damn it, he's trying to make me see things," Izuku thought to himself before flushing the toilet. If he was going to be having these visits from the Dark Lord of the Sith, then so be it. He will not fall to the dark side of the Force. He will make his master proud and keep himself on the light side, and only dabble in the dark side once he gains enough strength in order to keep himself from falling all the way. As he got himself ready for classes, He left the house in a hurry in order to make it there without showing that he was worried. It was a few minutes later that he was in his classroom sitting down in his seat as he meditated in order to calm his raging heart. He was wondering if his teachers were all right considering what had happened to them in the USJ. His answer was given when Aizawa had entered the room looking like a mummy. "Morning, class," Aizawa said, as he stood at the podium. "Morning, sensei," the class called out before one of them spoke up. "Are you sure that you should be teaching us right now, sensei? You were incredibly hurt last time we saw you," Suyu said, as she stared at Aizawa. "Don't worry about me, Recovery Girl makes it her mission to overstate the issue at hand. But that isn't what I'm here to inform you all about. Your fight isn't over," Aizawa said, pausing for dramatic effect. The class effectively tensed thinking that it was another villain fight before the teacher sighed and told them. "The UA Sports Festival is coming up within 2 weeks, and you all need to train yourselves in order to present yourself to the heroes who will be watching," Aizawa said, as everyone except for Izuku, Bakugo and Todoroki fell out of their seats anime style. Raising his hand, Izuku looked at his teacher with concern as well as worry as the man stiffly moved his head to look over at him. "What is it, Midoriya?" Aizawa asked, as Izuku hesitated for a moment before asking. "See, could you please not lie to us anymore? It gets really concerning that you lie to us, it also makes it to where we won't be as trusting of you," Izuku said, as Aizawa's face was in some kind of shock. Of course, nobody could see it, and he looked at the other students to get their opinions as they all nodded their heads. Iida was vehemently nodding his head. "Well, I will try and be more blunt with my information giving then. Not used to raising kids in a class," Aizawa said, before moving to lay down on the ground. Once he was sleeping on the ground, the class had devolved into some talking about what the sports festival would entail, but that was when their English teacher present Mike came in with a smile and laugh. "All right, who's ready for some English?" he called out, as most of the class collectively groaned whilst Izuku and some others were excited. Once the rest of the classes for the day were completed, Izuku was leaving his classroom with Uraraka and Iida as they were at the door when they saw that the hallway was blocked by students. "Could you all please move out of the way, we need to get to the lunchroom in order to eat," Iida called out, as Bakugo moved forwards. "Why are you all here? You're blocking our way," Mineta called out. "Can't you all see why they're here? They're here to check out the competition," Bakugo called out. "Wow, if this is what the hero course is building up, then I don't think I would like to be a hero with you," a purple-haired boy said, as he looked at the group with a deadpan expression. He looked more tired than anything, and Izuku moved forwards as he looked at the boy more closely. "Can we help you?" Izuku asked but didn't know the boy's name. "The name is Shinso Hitoshi, and I came here for a declaration of war. We all came to see the class that survived a villain attack. Did you know that those of us who didn't pass the entrance exams to get into the hero course could replace one of you?" Shinso asked, as Izuku gained a more pensive look. "I know about this, yes. I certainly hope you do get into the hero course," Izuku said, as the boy looked at him. "At least some of you are nice to others, maybe the hero course isn't all it's been made out to be," the boy said, before leaving. That was when another student came up as Izuku watched his emotional display. "We heard that you Class 1A bastards got attacked by villains and survived. I just came here to make sure that you aren't throwing it around like you are better than us," the boy said, as Izuku looked more carefully at him. "If we were boasting about our skills, then we aren't heroes. Heroes save people and protect them from any and all harm, and I am certainly not going about the place telling others about my skills and that I'm better than most," Izuku said, as another boy moved up. "Don't lie to us, you can tell us the truth," the blonde boy said, as Bakugo moved in. "Hey, if you are going to say anything about those of us who would gladly gloat about our attack, I'm the one you should be saying that to. Deku here isn't someone who would gloat about a win, he would rather be a pacifist if you ask me," Bakugo said, as he looked at the smug blonde looking at him angrily. "And from what it seems like, you are trying to make it seem like we were glad to be attacked by these grade D villains who attacked us," Bakugo said, as he grabbed the student's uniform. "That's exactly what I'm saying. You Class 1A bastards think you're better than us at 1B, and we will show you that in the sports festival," the smug blonde said, as Izuku sighed. Break a leg or two, I don't care. I'm not participating in this festival in order to gloat about how I survived a near-death experience because that would be completely rude to my classmates. We all nearly died there, and I for one would like to have a break from training for a bit. Izuku said, as he walked down the hall. Everyone watched as he went as Bakugo growled under his breath, but those who were a part of Class 1B had heard what he said. Damn, Deku needs to drop his pacifist ideals. It's what got his master and a few others killed. Before the young man left, looking at one another, they then looked at some of the other Class 1A students as they gave their reasons for why they think Bakugo said that. Needless to say, they were not impressed with how Izuku has an ideal of saving people but would rather not fight an opponent in order to save someone from death. The coming days before the festival was filled with Class 1A training together, besides Izuku, as the young man was increasing his capabilities within the Force. He wanted to make sure that he mastered his powers over the Force and keep himself from having any kind of failures within the sports festival. If he was to gain a new master within it, he would like to have someone who knew how to fight with a blade or used Force-similar abilities. Izuku was meditating in the middle of a training session between students as Aizawa walked over to the young man. "Is there a reason why you are meditating, Midoriya?" Aizawa asked, looking downright angry. "It's how I master the Force, sir. I already know how to fight, it's already placed within my muscle memory," Izuku said, as he looked at his teacher, eyes glazed over. "What are you meditating on then?" he asked, as Izuku took a moment to answer as he gained a sad expression. "I'm trying to learn a technique where I can hide my presence within the Force. My master had that ability when he walked around the Jedi Temple, and he even told me stories about how he scared other masters with his presence suddenly appearing next to them. It was nice to hear the pranks he did on his friends as well as allies at the Jedi Council from time to time. I was hoping that I could master this ability in due time, but it's harder than I thought," Izuku said, as he opened his eyes truly and found that everyone in his class was looking at him. "What's wrong?" Izuku asked, as Aizawa used his capture scarf on the boy before dragging him down the road. The boy was so confused that he just allowed the event to happen as the other classmates looked at him in both worry as well as concern. "Where are you taking me, sensei?" Izuku asked, as the man had the gall to smile mischievously at him before placing him in a seat within a very, very out-of-place room. "Midnight is going to be here soon. I suggest that you listen hard to what she will be teaching you, Midoriya. Because you might want to not look at the girls of your class during the festival tomorrow," Aizawa said, as Izuku gained a concerned but determined look in his eyes. That was abashed when Midnight entered the classroom with a seductive smirk on her face as she walked over to his desk. Sitting down on it, she watched as Izuku's hormonal mind looked at where she sat for a moment before bringing them back up to her eyes as she smiled down at him. "Welcome to sexual education class. I hope you are prepared to learn, Midoriya Izuku," Midnight said, as she watched the boy's face go from completely calm to completely scared and worried. "Don't worry, young man, we have all day and tomorrow to get you started," the woman said, as she licked her lips. Almost immediately Izuku jumped up from his seat and ran out the door, but as soon as he was 6 feet out of the door, a whip had wrapped itself around his left foot as he fell to the ground as some students milled about looking at him weirdly. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, as Izuku's hands squeaked across the floor as he screamed. "Run for your lives. Midnight is teaching sex education," Izuku screamed as the students who were milling about ran off in different directions. Izuku was inside the waiting room with his classmates as they prepared mentally for the sports festival to begin. He had been thinking about what the sexual education class he had with Midnight Sensei, and every time he looked at a girl classmate, he would blush at them before shaking his head and looking away. He had been holding true to his entire Jedi ways for far too long, and it's only now that he is seeing the girls for who they are as women, and not only as character. He had always been taught to never look at a woman for what she may be, and look at them for who they are. At least that was how Master Yoda explained to him. He was to keep any and all relationships away from his heart since they could be taken advantage of by the Sith as well as those who opposed him. He was so into his own thoughts he never heard Todoroki come up behind him and talk to him, pulling him out of his stupor. "Midoriya, from what I can believe, we are the strongest students within the first-year hero course. In terms of raw power as well as technique, we are the strongest in the class of 1A. Todoroki said, as Izuku looked at him. As much as I would love to agree with you there, Todoroki-kun, you really shouldn't state that our classmates are not in the same playing field as we are. I already know of your weakness, but you haven't seen what mine is. Everyone knows what your weakness is, Todoroki-kun, and it's high time that you stop holding back on us. And it will be your hubris that will get you killed in the future if you keep going on like you have been, not taking everyone in our class seriously. It's what happened to my master after all, Izuku said, as he got up from his seat and walked over to the door. As Todoroki was staring at Izuku's disappearing form as their class was called out into the field, Izuku kept his eyes trained forwards as he watched the entire stadium erupt out in cheers. As President Mike called out all the other students from their respective courses within the school, they all came out with smiles or scowls on their faces. Izuku kept himself in the middle of the crowd as he started to meditate in order to collect all of his nerves and hold them down in order to let out his confidence. And for the first year pledge, we have Midoriya Izuku. Midnight called out, as Izuku looked up at the woman. Shuddering immediately at her presence, Izuku started to walk up the stairs to the podium where she stood as she handed the microphone to him. Go get them, Tiger, you passed your classes by the way. Midnight said, with a wink. Shaking his head at the woman's antics, he looked at the crowd, and was now becoming even more nervous about having to talk to these people. Hello everyone, as she said, I am Midoriya Izuku. A member of Class 1A, and I would like to inform you all that I wasn't informed about the pledge I needed to make for the sports festival, so I will keep it short. To those of us who wish to become even stronger and join the hero course, I will tell you now. Try and kick us off our pedestals as the next heroes on the field, because we will fight back for our spots in the hero course. You all declared war on my class since we fought villains at the USJ, well. We won't be giving up our spots that easily. I hope you all the best of luck, and I will give the mic back to Midnight before she gives me any more nightmares. Izuku said, as he tossed the mic back to the woman and beelining it to the students below. Izuku finally made it to the students where safety in numbers were located as the woman looked at him specifically with a slight angered look. Well, aside from that insult towards me, I will begin the first spin of the wheel in order to see what kind of event we get for the first event. Midnight called out, as she spun a wheel. As the students as well as the teachers conversed about what kind of event they would be doing this year for the first event of the sports festival, it landed on an obstacle race. As Midnight had smiled at the outcome, she began to speak to the crowd as she talked about what kinds of dangers the students would have to traverse in order to finish the race. And Izuku was surprised that it wasn't that much harder than the UA entrance exams, since it was basically dodging each and every obstacle in your way to winning the festival's first event. Izuku had placed himself at the very back of the horde of students since he wanted to make sure that Todoroki couldn't take him out of the festival at the first shot. So as he waited for Present Mike to inform them all to head out, Izuku meditated some more as the timer dropped down from 10. Once it was at 5, he exited his meditation as he gained a determined expression on his face before once it was at 0. He jumped into the air as the said air dropped a few degrees as ice covered the ground of the entire stadium's grounds inside the Colosseum. As soon as he landed, the young Jedi Knight had run through the tunnel following his classmates who managed to escape from the ice attack with complete ease. Izuku had been doing some training in secret as he managed to learn some force abilities that allowed him to increase his physical abilities at a rapid pace. Learning force augment was a great thing to do over the time I was training. Izuku thought to himself as he ran through the tunnel and appearing near 4th place in the running. While Izuku was running down the road, he noticed that there were some robots attacking the students as he smiled to himself. It was literally like the UA entrance exams since the robots were 0 3-pointers who were attacking the students. Todoroki had managed to ice a few of the 0-pointers in positions that made them extremely dangerous for those who ran underneath them. Izuku, being the Jedi that he was, ran after Todoroki in order to catch up. He had no reasons for not running underneath the robots. He made sure that the other students were pumped after his speech, and he will not come in second on the first event of the day. So as he passed by some students who were having some issues passing the 0-pointer robots, he heard some explosions in the distance as he passed by Ashido, who was skating across the area on her acid. She waved at him with a wink, as he blushed slightly as she looked confused at him for a moment before recognition hit her eyes as she smiled deviously as he ran ahead. Unfortunately for her though, that bought a robot enough time to catch up to her and clonk her on the head, causing her to turn her attention away from Izuku, allowing him to run off. Within the next few minutes Izuku found himself catching up to Bakugo and Todoroki as they both were fighting over who was going to be in first. They both had already made it across the land that was missing as well as a bridge in the middle as Izuku relied on the force in order to allow him to cross. Running as fast as possible he crossed the rickety bridge in no time as he continued his speed towards the two in front. As soon as he arrived at the minefield, both first and second place users were battling around the mines in their attempt to cause the other to lose ground. Izuku decided to pass by them secretly in order to catch them off guard since their attention was not on him, but on each other. As soon as he passed by them both, he let out a snicker at how they were arguing with one another as he slowly made it towards the end of the minefield. But apparently life didn't wish for him to succeed as he heard explosions coming for him as he saw Bakugo with a manic smile on his face. "Don't think you can get away, Deku," Bakugo called out, as Izuku ran faster. Using the force, he stopped the boy's quirk from working by constricting the boy's muscles in his body, causing a forced cramp to hit his wrists, thereby causing the boy to fall onto a mine. Wincing from the explosion coming from the mine, Izuku made it out of the minefield as he continued forwards to the end of the race back at the beginning. Like before though, it seemed like life didn't wish for him to win as he felt the air suddenly get colder as he dodged to the left as a bunch of ice passed by him. Using the force to find where Todoroki was, he saw that the boy was gaining on him fast using his ice powers. So Izuku used his force abilities in order to increase his speed as well in order to keep a big lead on the boy and managed to pass the line in first. And coming in first place is Midoriya Izuku. And following him is Bakugo Katsuki. And in third place we have Todoroki Shoto. What a great lead up for the second event. Present Mike called out as Bakugo whined about not getting first. Todoroki though seemed to be glaring harshly at Izuku as he looked like he wanted to wring Izuku's throat out. Sighing, Izuku went to sit down to meditate in order to calm his raging heart. The problem with force augmentation was that it caused him a lot of stamina drain. He just hopes that it doesn't become noticeable in the future of the festival. If the next one isn't one that he is required to use it, he will save it for the battle tournament version of the festival. As soon as the last few students passed the lines in order to pass on to the second event, Midnight called out that there will be a few minutes for an interim before the second event began. Using that time frame in order to catch his breathing up and bring them down to normal levels, Izuku looked around as he thought about what the next event will entail. Shaking his head, he started to look at his classmates as he thought how he would pull out another win for what the second event will look and play out like. He looked at his classmates as the females were sweating hard and Izuku found his eyes staying focused on Toru for some reason since she was invisible, and the girl was shining like a beacon in the middle of the group. Although for some reason a new thought occurred to him as he stared at the girl, why was she looking like a goddess to him in the sun's rays? As he tried to look away from the girl, it seemed like she noticed his long stare as she walked over to him as he noticed she was now looking at him. "Hey, is there a reason why you are staring at me?" she asked, confused and concerned. And nothing," Izuku said, uncharacteristically stuttering. "Ashido said something about you having to take a special class with Midnight a few days ago. Would it have anything to do with that?" she asked, curiously as Izuku just stayed silent. Before he could say anything more about the problems at hand, Midnight spoke up as she released a crack of her whip. "All right everyone, welcome back to the second event of the festival. I hope you're prepared for the second event," she called out as she spun the wheel again. As it spun, Izuku looked at the choices. They were all team-based as Izuku thought about what kind of team he would like to use. Although for some reason Toru had stayed by his side at the moment as he continued to mutter aloud but not loud enough for it to be annoying. For the second event, it will be a cavalry battle. Those WHO are given set placements in the race will be given a certain number of points. Whoever was in 42 place, you will receive 1 point. Those of you WHO or above get respective points that are more the higher you go up. That is until you reach the top 3. Third place has 650 points, second place has 1050 points, and first place has 10 million points, Midnight said, as she smirked at Izuku's growing dread. The cavalry battle will consist of at least 4 members for a singular team. That means I need to make a team of 4 that can cement my win. Okay, I need to bring people that are going to want to move on to the next round without even being known. You want to join me, Toru? Izuku asked, before noticing the invisible girl was not present. Looking at the numbers on the point values, he found that Toru had just been underneath 42nd place and he could help but feel guilty about that. But that provided a new issue: who would want to team up with him in order to move on to the next round? Looking at the 41 other students who were now looking at him like he was a piece of meat, he shook his head as he meditated to himself. If he wasn't going to find anyone to join him, he would feel them out through the force. He did have about 15 minutes to make a team of at least 4. Here's hoping to find any other force sensitives to help him win this portion of the sports festival. Izuku stood alone in the field as the 15-minute timer had started to tick down as he thought about who to bring onto his team. Looking around the field, he found that there were other teams being made to combat him as well as other teams, but there was one thing he noticed. A blonde-haired boy was touching multiple people on the arms, which caught the attention of Izuku as he stared at the process. He watched as the boy touched a specific blonde with an explosive personality and pulled a piece of dead skin from his body and placed it inside his pocket. Izuku nodded to himself as he walked over to the young man as he was searching for someone else to borrow power from. Monoma-san, Izuku said, as the young man looked over at him. What does the pitiful Class 1A member want with me? He asked, guarded. You want to reach the next round, do you? Izuku asked, as Monoma nodded his head. Well, I have a good plan brewing up, and you are in it. All you need to do is get Todoroki's power within your grasp. Once you do, you can show off in the final event about your prowess with new quirks at your disposal. Izuku said, as Monoma thought about it. Will you make me the rider of this team you are making? If you aren't, then I won't join, Monoma said, as he looked smugly at Izuku. Sure thing, I don't really like all the attention on me anyway. But be sure to have a defensive quirk on hand so that you can use it at a moment's notice. Izuku said, as Monoma nodded. Well, looks like you have earned my trust, Class 1A bastard. Who else are you searching for? Monoma asked, as he continued after Izuku. We need someone who is excellent with defense as well as is capable of defending against ice powers. Izuku said, as Monoma nodded. Can't have one ice-resistant bastard, can we? Monoma muttered to himself. And time's up. I see that all teams have been made for everyone. With that, get together with your specific groups and line up. Midnight called out, as the students followed suit. Izuku stood alone with Monoma on his shoulder with Tokiyami right next to him as well as a support student from Power Loader's class right behind them. They were able to get a lock of Todoroki's hair with the young man looking kind of angered at them for taking a piece of his hair from his body. Izuku stood at the front of the horse with a smile on his face as he smirked towards their enemies. Izuku's team with Monoma as the leader had shown them all with 10,002,345 points total as Izuku looked at Monoma. Alright Monoma, you remember the plan, right? Izuku asked, as Monoma nodded. As soon as the round begins, start it off with at least 4 feet of ice covering us. That way we can stay hidden for a major portion of the event and have everyone go after one another without having to worry about ourselves. Izuku said, as Tokiyami as well as Hatsume from the support course nodded. With that all settled, let us begin the second event, the cavalry battle. Midnight called out as she swiped her whip around as 2 massive glaciers had broken out within the arena. One heading for Midoriya's team as well as one being placed around themselves. Todoroki was completely confused as to how Midoriya's team wasn't taken out with his attack on them when he noticed the massive dome of ice covering the middle of the arena. Shaking his head, he moved to take on some other students since he wouldn't use his father's side of the quirk. As Monoma as well as the rest of the team had heard the telltale sounds of explosions as well as battle outside of the area, Izuku drilled a hole with his lightsaber so that a small camera could enter the small dome so that everyone could see what his team was up to. Once his team was made known to not be eliminated from the attack of Todoroki, everyone would start to boo at them for not joining the fighting. As much as I would like to fight out there, as a Jedi I need to be a keeper of the peace. I do not fight unless I am forced to. Izuku muttered before he felt a hand touch his hair. HMPH. Typical, a Jedi from space wouldn't have a quirk of their own. How had you lasted this long on our planet? Monoma asked, as Tokiyami looked over curious as well. Well, it's like this, I didn't. This is all a dream for me. Either I am living within the Force and not alive, or this is real, and I don't think it is. Izuku said, as Monoma scoffed out a laugh. Once 14 minutes had passed, Monoma had lowered the ice shield for them as he smiled at the sunshine he got as they all heard explosions coming for them. Looking to his right, Izuku found Katsuki blasting over to them with a manic smile on his face, shouting towards them. That 10 million points is mine. Katsuki screamed before being slapped with a vine, courtesy of Monoma. Get back to your own team, we only have 30 seconds. Know your place, Class 1A scum. Monoma scoffed. Monoma, what did I say about your language? Izuku scolded as Monoma looked at him with a pointed look. Well, it's not my fault that you don't really want to fight in this event. If you aren't fighting, then I have to at least act all haughty with some other students. Monoma chastised Izuku. Rolling his eyes, Izuku took notice of Todoroki's team making their way over to them as Izuku told Monoma to use Hatsume's jetpack in order to fly into the air. Once he was gone, his team scattered and took on Todoroki's team as Iida had used his super move Recipro Burst in order to try and get to Monoma before he got too far into the sky. Izuku then used the force to pull down Iida as he was just about to reach Monoma's ankle, and caused the entire team of Todoroki to fall towards the earth just as the buzzer was called by midnight. Once that happened, the team had landed on the ground with Todoroki on top of them all, with his face being smushed into Yaoyorozu's breasts for some reason. The girl was blushing as Todoroki looked at her from where he was at before standing up and helping her stand up from her spot. Wiping the dust and debris off of her, Todoroki pulled her closer and told her something that made her slightly blush more before smacking his head into the ground with a huff. What was that about? Izuku asked Tokiyami as the emo boy looked confused just as him, if not more. Once everyone was gathered for the final part of the festival, Izuku was seen eating some katsudon as he thought about who would be fighting who in the tournament part of the festival. He never noticed how some people sat down next to him at his table until he felt someone touching his back. Looking back to see who it was, he found it was Momo, Ochako and Toru who were looking at him with smiles on their faces. Hey girls, how are you all doing today? Izuku asked before noticing the cheerleader outfits on them. What is going on with the getup? Izuku asked before the girls could even answer the first question. We're fine, Midoriya-san, we just were disappointed when you didn't choose us for the cavalry battle event. Momo said, as Izuku gained a guilty expression. Oh, Mineta told us about how Aizawa-sensei said that there was a cheerleader event where we had to wear these clothes for the final event. Toru said, as Izuku looked at them blandly. I'm sorry, but that just isn't true. Izuku said, as the trio looked confused. What do you mean? Ochako asked, as Izuku stared at her. I watched the previous sports festivals when I was younger, Ochako. There wasn't a cheerleader event given by UA in their history, in fact it's looked down upon here. Izuku said, as the trio of girls looked even more guilty before getting ready to leave when Toru looked at Izuku with a funny expression on her body. Well, do you like how they look on us? The girl asked, twirling around. Unknown to the girl, Izuku had spat out his food, causing both Momo and Ochako to move closer to him, noticing a red hue on his cheeks as he struggled to regain his motor functions. Please just put something else on, you three looks better without them on. I don't want them in my dreams. Izuku muttered the last part, but it was heard by Ochako and Momo due to their close proximity. They now knew what could get him aroused in the slightest if they want to earn his affection, and once they all left in order to inform Aizawa about what Mineta told them, Izuku was approached by someone else. Midoriya, a word please. Todoroki said, as Izuku followed after putting his food away. Following the boy into one of the exits to the stadium, Izuku found that Todoroki was standing near a wall as he folded his arms over his chest. I almost used my fire side because of your strategies. Jedi or not, you almost made me break my vow to myself. Todoroki said, as Izuku looked at him hard. Todoroki, this quirk you have, it's yours. Not Endeavor's. You need to discern which is your quirk and which is Endeavor's. Izuku said, as he went to leave the boy. I haven't finished talking to you, Midoriya. Todoroki said, as Izuku looked back. That's right, but if you don't use your full power, you are just looking down on your classmates. And it really hurts that you won't take us seriously, because we are going to become friends as well as allies in the future. I won't work with someone who will only use half of his gifted power. It's just wrong to not use a power that was gifted to you. Izuku said, as he left Todoroki all alone with his thoughts. Will Midoriya Izuku and Shinso Hitoshi enter the arena please? A voice called out, and as Izuku made his way over to the arena he found Ojiro looking at him with a stern look. I need to warn you about Shinso, the boy said, as they walked over to his waiting room. So that boy with the purple hair, Shinso I think Present Mike said his name was correct. Ojiro asked, as Izuku nodded. Whatever you do, do not answer to any of his phrases. He will take over your mind and force you to his whims and you won't be able to escape it until you are damaged slightly. Ojiro said, as Izuku nodded. As a Jedi he knew about mind tricks as Izuku knew just what to do as he made his way over to the arena where his opponent waited for him. As soon as he stood in the arena the boy in front of him spoke to him. Well so you're finally here. To think that one of the hero course is going to beat down on a measly little civilian. I wonder how that will look to the eyes of the public. The boy said, as Izuku merely tilted his head. This match is ready to begin. Midnight called out, as Izuku started to walk towards the young man. You must be blessed to have made it into the hero course with your telekinetic powers people like you are the ones who I hate the most. The boy said, as Izuku continued to walk slowly towards the young man who got even more desperate. I guess your girls are getting it on with whoever they want if they were dressing like sluts The boy said, as Midnight glared at him. She knew that it was meant to try and get the boy in front of him to answer his question. Izuku merely smirked at him. I know what you're trying to do, and it won't work on me. Izuku said, as he willingly made the force make his eye color go from normal emerald green to a dazed look instead. Once the boy in front of him noticed the dazed look in front of him, Izuku was only using this to see what the boy would do. Now that you are under my control, leave the arena, I have to win this tournament. The boy said, as Izuku just continued to walk towards him. The boy was now getting anxious as Izuku was now entering range to enter a fist fight. He wanted to see if the boy in front of him had done any kind of physical training in terms of martial arts. As soon as he turned his eye color back to their original bright emerald color, he rushed the boy at close range. What? The boy called out, completely stunned by how Izuku seemingly shrugged off his control. Izuku landed a few punches as well as kicks to the young man as he used a force push to send the boy down the arena and land near the line. The boy's eyes were staring at the line as he seemed panicked. You know, if you really wanted to control someone with your quirk you could at least make some gestures in order to throw them off. Izuku said, as he waved his hand in front of the boy. You want to leave the arena and apologize to Midoriya Izuku later. Izuku said, as monotone as he could. The boy then repeated the phrase as he left the arena and continued to walk away as Izuku was made the winner of the match. Looking back at his hand, Izuku had allowed his will over the boy to end as the young man had noticed he was back in his class's watching pad. He glared over at Izuku as the young man had looked at him with a pained expression on his face, which caused Shinso to look even closer at the boy's eyes. They were always expressive since before the festival. Whenever he saw them, they were always filled with pain as well as slight fear. But now they were filled with determination as well as sadness, but most of all, the pained expression on the boy's face showed everything Shinso wanted to know. He didn't wish to use that move against him, it was only a mere lesson being given to him for the long run. Izuku would return to the watch pad where his class were remaining as they watched the next fight of Todoroki vs. Zero. Hey, are you okay? Momo asked, as Izuku looked at her for a moment. Remembering the words of Shinso for a moment, but the mental image of Momo in the cheerleader outfit, Izuku blushed slightly and shook his head. I'm fine, just remembering what Shinso said about you, Toru and Ochako. Izuku said, as Momo nodded. They all watched as Todoroki had defeated Zero without much problems as the boy was frozen in a massive glacier, but Izuku saw the conflict in Todoroki's eyes as he caused the ice to melt. That's not good, Izuku thought to himself. Once that match was over, Izuku kept his eye on Todoroki as the young man was his opponent for the next match in the tournament as he kept his eyes calm. He knew that this opponent would do his very best in order to win with only one side of his powers, and he couldn't help but feel slightly angered by it. Here he was without a quirk but the force being his power, and Todoroki has the perfect power to save people and he is squandering his potential all because of something he has no clue about. He will make the boy see reason, even if it gets him to lose his match against Todoroki since he will be saving the boy from himself. As the next match began, Izuku watched as Kirishima and Tetsu had started to get into a slugfest as they prepared themselves for a win for either side. It wasn't a good thing that Monoma of Class 1B was constantly harassing them with his haughty attitude, and it was getting on Izuku's nerves a bit. As the boy continued to talk shit to them, Izuku quietly stood up and walked over to the small barrier that separated their classes. Taking a deep breath, Izuku looked at the boy as Monoma looked at him now as Izuku was making his way over to him. "Oh, what is this? Are you going to do something?" Monoma asked, cockily. "Yeah, I am. 2 things, please keep your voice down. 1, some of us would rather hear what's going on than hear your incessant babbling. And 2, Izuku said, punching the boy in the face, knocking him out. As Class 1B watched in horror as Izuku just assaulted their classmate, they got prepared to attack him. That was until they saw the flickering glow in his eyes. They were constantly flickering between yellow and emerald, green, and it scared them more since they noticed the dark aura flowing around him. "Sorry about that, Midoriya-kun, could you forgive us for this?" Kendo asked, as she grabbed the unconscious boy and pulled him from the barrier. "Please, just keep that young man away from my class unless it's a joint project between classes. Other than that, I forgive you all. I need to cool off this energy I got," Izuku said, as he walked out of the Class 1A stands. He was quickly followed out by Momo, Uraraka and Toru as the trio went to find where he was going. Whilst Izuku was looking for a spot to sit down and cool himself down from the near step into the dark side of the Force, Izuku took in deep breaths. "I'm sure that this was a test from Sidious in order to try and get me to fall from the light. Joke's on him. I already used the dark side of the Force a while back. I have full control of my powers in the dark side, I just need to control my attitude in that state." Izuku muttered to himself as he felt the presence of the girls coming towards him. Looking over at his left, he found Momo, Uraraka and Toru walking around the area in search of him, and raising his hand the girls noticed and ran over. "Hey, are you alright? Your aura became like that of a villain for a moment," Momo asked, as she fretted over him. Uraraka and Toru had the same feelings as they looked him over, and more specifically his eyes, as they saw that one had the signs of yellow in his emerald orbs. "Were you about to use the dark side?" Uraraka asked, as she gave Izuku a bottle of water. Drinking the cold water caused his emerald orbs to slowly bring back their true emerald color and drain the yellow out entirely. "Thank you, Uraraka, and to answer your question, I used a small amount of it. It was just to knock him out though. I didn't wish to hurt him, but he kept talking trash about you all and it isn't heroic to harass people," Izuku said, as the girls nodded. "When will we learn how to fight like you do?" Momo asked, as Izuku looked over at her. "I have no idea. Based on what I know, everything about Earth was forgotten on Coruscant, and it seems like the Emperor of the Galaxy decided to never come here. So either Master Yoda hid this planet from those who wished to do harm, or he deleted any and all information about Earth from those of the dark side of the Force," Izuku said, as the girls nodded once more. They were sitting there for a while before Izuku heard a familiar voice come from behind himself, and it gained the girls' attention. "Master of both light and dark you are," the familiar voice said, causing Izuku to turn around immediately. Looking at the ghostly appearance of his old master, Izuku teared up as he kneeled to Grandmaster Yoda, as the old master of the Force had smiled at him. How are you here? Don't Force ghosts only appear in places where the F-Force is strongest?" Izuku asked, as Master Yoda simply chuckled. "Master of the Force I have become, but lessons taught will be given. Becoming one with the Force is difficult, teacher. I did have to become this form, but no matter, your turn to come has arrived. Show humanity the power of a Jedi. And for the boy, from himself you must save, that is both the Jedi and hero way," Master Yoda said, before starting to disappear. Hey Master. Izuku asked, as Yoda looked back. Is it what? Yoda asked, as Izuku looked at him. Am I allowed to have AR relationship, and now that the Jedi Order is destroyed? Izuku asked, as the girls looked at Izuku with happiness. Many things wrong were the Jedi, but, withstand the alluring power of the dark side of the Force, you need not ask. Yoda said, as Izuku smiled at the old master. Yoda then disappeared as Izuku hugged himself as tears came down his eyes once more as he finally got the closure he wanted from his master's demise. As the trio walked back to the platform where their classmates were waiting, Izuku was making his way towards the entrance of the tunnel where he would soon be fighting Todoroki. As he was entering the arena, Izuku had kept his eye on the boy who was walking out of his end of the tunnel, and he was looking pissed at everything. Taking in a deep breath, Izuku let the power of the Force flow through him as he allowed himself to fall into equilibrium within that power itself. Taking a seat in the arena just before the battle would begin, Izuku started to initiate a battle meditation for a moment to collect all his power. As each fighter prepared, Midnight called out, as Izuku stood back up after collecting himself. Summoning his lightsaber, he stared at Todoroki as some of the audience had started talking about whether or not he was really in the hero course. Izuku nodded his head as Todoroki had nodded his own with much more anger brimming to the surface as Izuku sighed. It will take a few minutes to get through to the boy and he will not lose himself in the power of the dark side of the Force in order to do so. All right, Hajime, Midnight called out, as Izuku immediately activated Force Judgment as powerful yellow lightning had exploded from his left hand. Todoroki had launched a massive glacier of ice as Izuku's electric attack had countered the ice completely and blew it up. As both fighters stood in the misty air that was the result of the explosive attack, Izuku started to move towards the boy as Todoroki had run towards him as well. Meeting one another in the middle, Izuku had started to use the Force in order to fight Todoroki to a standstill in the middle of the arena. Todoroki had landed a few hits on Izuku which caused some ice to form on him, whilst Izuku would destroy them with the Force causing them all to crack each time and break off of his body. It got to the point that Izuku was about to be covered in a glacier when he pulled out his lightsaber and sliced through the ice. The crowds were in uproar as they were cheering for both students as they thought both were giving it their all. Izuku cut his way until he managed to get to the high ground of Todoroki as the boy looked up at Izuku. It's over Todoroki, I have the high ground. Izuku called out, as Todoroki pushed a pillar underneath him a little. You underestimate my power, Todoroki said, as Izuku softly looked at the boy. You won't be capable of defeating me without your left side Todoroki, you are killing yourself. Izuku said, as Todoroki got angrier and launched a new attack on Izuku. The largest glacier he had ever created up till this point had shown itself as it blasted towards Izuku, as the boy sighed and pulled out his lightsaber once more. Swinging it around in a wide arc, he sliced through the ice as he cut it apart as he felt as large cubes of the glacier had fallen towards the young man. Jumping out of the way, he soon found himself in front of a completely cold-looking Izuku as the young man stated 3 words. Game over, kid, Izuku said, as he blasted Todoroki into his own ice shelf before the boy created an ice wall behind himself to stop him from flying out of the arena. In the stands the heroes who were watching were starting to become alarmed at how one of the students became colder in his attitude towards a classmate. Hey, shouldn't we stop this before it gets dangerous? I mean, one of them seems to have a lethal weapon, what if he uses it against the boy? A hero asked a much higher ranked one. I don't know, he might be teaching Endeavor's son a lesson. From what I know the boy should have the ability to use fire and ice. But the boy isn't using the fire when he should and is primarily using ice. I personally believe that the boy is half-assing this tournament. I just hope this doesn't go too far, the hero said, as Endeavor looked at the two before keeping his eyes on the battle. To think my own son would go this far in order to prove me wrong. I know I have done horrible things in the past, and whatever I do now will not do anything to right the wrongs I've done. But I need to prove myself to my son in the only way I know how, being there for him before I inevitably die. Endeavor thought to himself as he kept an eye on his struggling son. Back in the battle, Izuku was glaring coldly at Todoroki as the boy got back up as he glared at Izuku with fury. Did my father put you up to this? He asked, before launching some ice at Izuku. The boy just sliced through the ice like it was a hot knife through butter as he continued to move closer to Todoroki with a cold expression on his face. You continue like this, Todoroki, you will die of your own quirk's effects. There is a reason you were born with both fire and ice. Use your ice in order to cool yourself down, and you use your fire to heat yourself up when you are too cold. And right now you are abusing your ability to heat yourself up with how cold you are becoming. Izuku said, as he dodged another ice attack from Todoroki. It wasn't until Izuku was right in front of Todoroki that the young man had finally noticed how Izuku was not smiling at him like he usually did. He was glaring at him with a cold expression. Worse than his own. Why do you think that you can tell me what to do? I will not use his fire. Todoroki growled out as Izuku stared at him. You are aware that it is your own quirk, right? It's your father's flames mixed in with your mother's to create flames of your own mixed in with ice of your own. The perfect quirk, and it is being misused by a brat who cannot get his head out of his own rear end and think about what people would want from him. Izuku said, launching a kick so fast that Todoroki was barely able to see it smack right into his chest. What are you going to do when you are supposed to heat up a civilian because they're about to catch hypothermia? What are you going to do when you come across a fire villain who could counter your cold ice? Will you let civilians die and tell them that the reason why you won't use your fire is because it's your father's and that he abused you in order to train you how to wield it right? Izuku asked, as Todoroki gained a furious expression as he launched even more ice as he started to show the effects of hypothermia as Izuku slowly appeared behind him. You should really warm yourself up, Todoroki. If you are not capable of defeating me twice in a row this year, what do you think you will be capable of against a villain who can completely counter your ice? Izuku asked, as he kicked the boy back towards the middle of the arena. Looking at his arm, Izuku watched as small pieces of ice started to form as Izuku sighed before using the force to completely tear apart the ice at the atomic level. Moving closer to Todoroki in the middle of the arena, and thanks to the misty air surrounding the boy, who was undergoing a memory when he was a child at the moment after taking in Izuku's words, Izuku walked towards Todoroki. His eyes seemingly glowing a vibrant red as he spoke up, catching the boy's attention. You know, as a child growing up, I was announced that I didn't and wouldn't ever have a quirk growing up. That I wouldn't ever be capable of showing that I would be capable of having a superpower. That is the only memory that I have as a child. But looking at someone who has that exact perfect power, and how they are just squandering it all because of a small grudge. I can't ever see you becoming a hero with that kind of power. All because of the fact that you are going to become your father in terms of attitude towards others. You will become another Endeavor who kills his villains. But that's alright, because we will have another person taking the place of All Might soon, and I don't think it will be me. Izuku said, as he stood in front of the now trembling Todoroki. And imagine the song above playing here. He wasn't trembling only because of the ice. It was the sheer evil intent on Izuku's face as he was looking demonic with his hair covering his eyes. It was completely scary for Todoroki as the boy watched as Izuku's face became deformed around the mouth and eyes as his emerald orbs for color were replaced with black sclera and a deep crimson color in the middle. Izuku's hair became wilder as it was showing him using the power of the dark side of the force as Izuku glared at Todoroki. I am only giving you one more chance, Todoroki. Use your fire and if you win, I will let you go. But lose and only use your ice, you will fall by my hand. Izuku said, as Todoroki looked on in horror. Izuku's visage becoming slightly taller in the viewpoint of the boy as Todoroki and Midnight stared on in awe and shock. Everyone around the stadium were looking on fearfully. But all that feeling of dread as well as fear radiating from the arena soon disappeared as everyone let out a breath that they didn't know they were holding. It was just moments later that Izuku started to move towards Todoroki once more as the boy started up his fire on his left side, causing Izuku to smile. His smile wasn't filled with evil intent as well as a dreadful presence behind it. It was a happier smile that was filled with love and compassion. There you go, Todoroki, you did it. Now come on and show me the full power of your fire. Izuku said, as Todoroki shook his head. You're crazy, you know. You almost lost yourself to the dark side of the force, all just to make me use my left side. Todoroki asked, as Izuku gained an annoyed look on his face. Well, someone had to beat it into that the fire of your left side is your own, not your father's. Izuku said, as Todoroki nodded. As they moved to clash in the middle, Todoroki spoke towards Izuku as if he knew he was going to win with this last move. Midoriya, thank you, the boy said, as he pushed the fire out towards Izuku as the boy merely smirked. As both boys clashed in the middle of the arena, everything exploded outwards as inside the smoke and debris, Izuku dug his feet into the arena through the force to keep him inside the arena. Once the debris and ice was cleared from the arena, the people surrounding the arena watched on to see who the winner between the duo would be. Once the dust and debris cleared out of the way, it was shown that Todoroki was on the edge of the arena as Izuku moved towards the boy as he grabbed his shirt and tossed him out of the arena. You did good, Todoroki-kun, just not good enough, Izuku said, as Todoroki looked up at a burned Izuku. His entire body was on fire, but it seemed to not be bothering Izuku as he used the force to turn off the fire on his body, as it showed he was surprisingly fine underneath the flames. Leaving the arena in order for it to be repaired, Izuku brought Todoroki to Recovery Girl's office as he spoke to the boy. Think you will be able to use your power against your classmates later on this year? Izuku asked, as Todoroki thought about it. I'm not sure, I will need to think about it, the boy said, as Izuku laid the boy on the bed. He received a kiss from Recovery Girl as the boy fell asleep, as Izuku received one from the nurse as well for his hidden injuries. He left the room as he prepared for the next match. The matches that came after the one with him and Todoroki were not that good in comparison, but there was the match that was Bakugo versus Uraraka as they both prepared for one another in the ring. The girl ran towards Bakugo as the boy started to release explosions one after another as she was thrown back. Izuku was very worried for the girl as she seemingly was getting hurt more than she was hitting the ground compared to the explosions. It got to the point of which that the girl had thrown her Ua jacket at her opponent to catch him off guard, but it didn't work. But there was a plan in the works from the girl as she had prepared pieces of the stage high above Bakugo, who hadn't noticed yet as the girl smirked at him. Improvised move, Meteor Shower, Uraraka called out, causing Bakugo to look up and see a large bombardment of concrete coming his way. Lifting his arm in the air, Bakugo released the single largest blast that Izuku had ever seen since the battle training under All Might's supervision. All the rubble was destroyed in that instant, and as Bakugo was completely wide open for being touched by Uraraka, do not take that wrong. The girl had run towards the boy, but just fell short of the young man as she passed out from quirk overuse. Bakugo was declared the winner of that match as the next match for the finals was Izuku and whoever would win between Iida and a girl named Mei Hatsume. Smiling to himself, he prepared for his next match, believing it to be against Iida as the boy would be preparing his match against the girl at the moment. He couldn't wait to see what the boy could do against him in the arena. The previous battle between Bakugo and Uraraka was very good compared to the one before that of Izuku and Todoroki. The upcoming fight between Iida and Hatsume was coming up very fast as Izuku prepared for the next battle in the tournament fight. As Izuku sat down in the stands with his classmates, he watched as Iida and Hatsume had entered the field as they prepared for their own fight. Although there was something different about Iida as the young man was looking more kitted out than Hatsume was, once Izuku noticed what the girl was planning out, he couldn't help but chuckle. What's wrong, Izuku? Momo questioned as Izuku pointed at the battle about to happen. This isn't going to go how Iida-kun would like to. He is basically being used as a commercial for the support companies watching her. I kind of feel bad for him, Izuku said, as the battle soon began. Iida, wanting to end the fight before it could even begin, used his strength as well as speed in order to try and smack the girl out of the ring with his left leg. But as soon as he made it to the other end of the arena, he noticed that Hatsume was still in the middle of the arena as she fiddled with her microphone. But it was here that everything became extremely hilarious as she kept dodging the strikes of Iida as she went on to make a commercial about her support items. Once her commercial was over, she willingly gave up her position in the festival in order to continue to work on her inventions. With Iida moving on to the next round, another fight was happening between Momo and Tokiyami as they entered the ring. Izuku kept his eyes on both combatants as he made sure to analyze their attack patterns, as well as attack forms so he could come up with counters in the future. Bakugo was watching the fight as well, knowing that the fight between him and one of those two would be for the semifinals. And sure enough, Momo was defeated by Tokiyami, as the young man had defeated her before she could be given enough time to think about what she could use against him. Izuku was a little bummed out at how Momo was defeated, but he knew that Kyoka would be able to bring her spirits back up. They've known one another for much longer than he would have known her, not like he didn't know her at all. He just preferred that Momo talked to someone she had really known within their class that wasn't him. By the time it was his match with Iida, Izuku prepared himself in the arena as Midnight called out to Iida for his match to begin. But nothing had happened. It wasn't much longer that Iida had informed those in charge of the festival that he would be leaving due to a family emergency. Izuku noticed that a family emergency would mean that something happened to either his parents or his older brother, who was a hero at the moment. So as soon as he was given the win by default, he went back to the stands and pulled out his phone. Looking at the first article on the site made him wish he truly hadn't done so. A few hours before Iida's pulling of the festival, Ingenium, pro hero within the top 100 heroes within Japan, was running around Hosu chasing a small-time villain. As soon as he took down the villain, he gave the man over to the police as he took in some juice to recover some energy. Shaking his head, he had thought about the fact that he was missing the sports festival that his younger brother was partaking in. But as he stood up, he looked around to see if there was any issues within the part of Hosu that he was patrolling about. Seeing nothing in particular, he ran over to a fire escape before climbing to the rooftop and running around the town in search of villainous activity. Tensai Iida, one of the better descendants of the original Ingenium, had been moving about Hosu for about 5 hours since he started his patrol earlier that morning. He had known that being a hero would be tough work, but he had never prepared for a villain to come seek him out for some biased reasoning. You may be wondering why he is thinking about this. Well, the answer was the fact that the hero killer was about to kill another low-ranking hero who was, based on his views, not a very self-sacrificing hero. Jumping in to save the hero in question, he blocked a hit from the hero killer's blade, and as they both jumped back, they stared at one another. One with abated trepidation, and the other with recognition. "What brings Ingenium to my purge location?" Stain questioned, as Ingenium merely glared at his opponent. "You are coming in for the deaths of innocent heroes," Ingenium called out, as Stain clicks his tongue. "So it seems like you are a fake like all the others. I had thought you'd be someone who was more worried about those nearby," Stain said, preparing his blades. Moving towards one another with speed rivaling that of two speed quirk users, Stain and Ingenium had clashed in the air. The hero who Ingenium had protected heard the clash and called for backup before entering the battle with the higher-ranking hero. But even with their increased numbers, they had no idea how Stain had defeated his opponents, nor how he managed to kill them. A lot of dodging and punching had gone throughout the last hour as Stain and Ingenium had fought, especially with their help. But eventually Stain had managed to slice the helmet off of Ingenium and kick the man down. The hero killer smiled down at Ingenium. "You fared well for a higher-ranking pro. But you were far too weak in order to defeat me. Give yourself a few years and you would meet me and win. But alas, you were not to be the winner. With your death, Hero Society will be called to choose someone who will be more heroic than you, Ingenium," Stain said, raising his blade. "At least I bought time for the hero you were after to get away," Ingenium said, as he struggled to stand back up. But that was when Ingenium noticed that Stain licked his blade, and every single movement he had of his muscles were immediately frozen. Collapsing to the ground, Ingenium had looked around for what had happened. He had no idea that the hero killer could paralyze his opponents through the consumption of their blood. He didn't know how long it would last, but if it wasn't long, he would make sure to run away to live another day. But as soon as the killer stood in front of him, the man stared into Ingenium's eyes before a cruel smirk came upon his face. "Well, it seems you can change after all. Just from looking into your eyes you seem to be having a different thought to defeating me. Protecting the innocent, you are not to be culled, but to send a message," Stain said, as he stabbed Ingenium in the middle of his back, severing his spinal cord. "Gyaaaaaaaaaaaaaaa, ha!" Ingenium screamed. No, Tensai screamed in agony. As Stain had pulled the blade out in a single go, he thrusted the blade back in to break the spine so badly that it couldn't be healed correctly. He would be paraplegic for the rest of his life. As soon as Stain left the area, another hero had arrived on the scene and managed to call for paramedics in order to take him to the hospital. It would be a very long night of surgery as well as many forms of clearing of his back as well as spine, but as soon as it was done, Tensai could no longer feel the bottom half of his body. His hero career was ended, before it could even blossom into something that could be used to inspire more heroes to be born. Iida Tenya had arrived in the hospital with his family as they ran to his brother's hospital room, and looking at the utter defeated look on his brother's face caused Tenya to grow a hatred for whoever did this to him. Unaware to everyone around, Iida Tenya made a silent promise to himself that night: his brother's career would be avenged, even if it meant death. Back at the sports festival, Bakugo had defeated his opponent being Tokiyami with his explosive hands. The young man just couldn't handle all the light moving towards his quirk and could not keep up with Bakugo's speed as well as power. So now it was all up to Izuku and Bakugo, the two arguably most powerful students within Class 1A. One who had power over the force and could use many other abilities within it that would seem similar to other properties of quirks. And the other who could produce nitroglycerin-like sweat that he could ignite on his hands, and possible his feet if he trained hard enough to achieve this. The two boys had entered the arena as the final match of the festival was about to go underway, and both boys were staring at one another with determination. "You ready to lose, Deku?" Katsuki yelled as he gained a powerful battle smirk. Izuku remained calm and collected as he smiled at his old friend with something akin to his own battle-ready smirk. "I've been waiting to do this for years, Kachan. I can't wait to show you the power of the Force," Izuku said, as both boys glared at one another. "Are both contestants ready?" Midnight called out, as both students nodded. They wouldn't take their eyes off of one another without any reason. They knew the other would use the moment they look away in order to take them by surprise. "Then I say this battle is ready to start," Midnight called out, as both boys moved towards one another. Izuku went for a straightforward punch towards Bakugo, as the boy created an explosion in Izuku's face and flew behind him, readying another explosive punch at the boy's exposed back. Izuku had used the force in order to protect his open back from the concussive force of the boy's attack, and as soon as Izuku turned around to look at his old friend, they smiled at one another before clashing in the middle of the arena. Small shockwaves being sent out from each blow they launched at one another. The shockwaves from Bakugo's attacks were what could be seen. Izuku had used the force in his attacks in order to strengthen them against his opponent. He knew that he would need to make sure that Bakugo was out cold for more than a second for his win to be final. Bakugo knew to make sure that Izuku was completely out cold for his win to be set in stone. He wouldn't lose to Izuku now after all the training they did with one another. They clashed more and more throughout the fight, and the crowd was having a lot of fun watching the two pummel the other. The two's fight had gotten to the point that they were channeling their powers to the ultimate maximum they could use. Izuku was still not using the dark side of the force. He was still not ready to utilize the power without having himself fall completely into it. So when Bakugo blasted him onto his back and pinned him to the ground, he heard something completely out of left field from the boy. "Why aren't you using the dark side that you call the force? Are you too scared to use it?" Bakugo growled at Izuku. "I'm not afraid of it. I can't control whether or not I will kill you instantly when I use it. I would rather wait until I have full control over it. After that moment I will fight you with it, alright?" Izuku asked, as Bakugo thought about it. "No, I want to fight you when you use the dark side of the force against me. I want to see what I am up against when you use it. You used it against Todoroki, so why won't you use it against me?" Katsuki asked angrily. "You want to see what happens when I use the dark side? Fine then, but fair warning. Things are about to get ugly," Izuku said, as he let the dark side completely consume his body. Everyone in the crowd could sense the dropping of air pressure when Izuku released his dark side. Everything about the boy was now in question. If he could utilize this power almost immediately, why was he hiding it? Yeah, it was very dangerous and very lethal towards others, but why would he prefer to hide it away from prying eyes? They then saw why as the boy looked at Katsuki with yellow eyes that made him look eviler than the boy was able to comprehend. Izuku started to walk over to Katsuki as the boy's legs started to tremble from how calm and collected Izuku was. "So this is you using your dark side powers. How are you this intimidating? Your eyes are way too expressive when you don't use it," now they look like a Dragon Ball Z character. Katsuki said, looking at Izuku's form. It was slightly more muscular, but at the same time, his hair was normal if a bit messier. His eyes were the thing that caused most people to be put off by his appearance. Their original emerald color had been replaced with a very deep yellow, borderlining on red in color. The young man had merely raised his hand at Bakugo in a choking position as the young man was lifted into the air as if he was nothing. You wanted to see the power you were up against? Well, this is it. I won't kill you because the other half likes to have you as a friend. But I only find you as a mere annoyance. Also, how about you just kiss that red-haired boy already? We know you are gay already. Izuku's dark side self spoke as Bakugo blushed crimson at the notion of Kirishima and him in a relationship. He was so caught off guard that he never noticed that he was released from the stranglehold on his throat and tossed from the ring. Once Bakugo was out of the ring, Izuku had lowered the veil of the dark side of the force as he took a knee. Gasp gasp T, that was harder than it thought. I need more training with that. Izuku muttered to himself as he held onto his chest. Whilst Izuku was having his time as a hero in training on planet Earth, a massive ship within the deepest parts of the galaxy was seen floating around. It was constantly moving around a massive floating object within the confines of space as it was undergoing construction. A man covered in a large cloak covering most of his face had noticed a large spike of dark side power from the other end of the galaxy. Looking in the direction the power had come from, he smiled at the power that was steadily growing in strength. So it seems like a new Sith Lord is in the making. I cannot wait to see how powerful this one will become, although I cannot pinpoint where the force energy I am sensing is coming from. It will not matter soon enough. I already sent a force projection to him a few months ago. He will not escape from me that easily, the man said, before walking over to the bridge of the ship. Looking over the entire construction of his massive weapon of galaxial proportions, the man watched as for some reason lightning had flashed deep within the depths of space, revealing the man's face. His face now revealed showed that he had been excessively old, not to mention that the deep yellow eyes made him look every bit as intimidating as his aura was. This man was known as Darth Sidious, and he was a master of the Sith Order, and he was smiling at his best weapon being created off in the distance. Master, what is the force energy that I am sensing in the distance? A modulated voice called out, rhythmic breathing following after the question. Don't worry about it, Vader, it cannot defeat us with its pitiful power. They will need years of training in order to become as strong as us. You were created by the Force in order to bring the Jedi to their knees. You have already done that, and I thank you for it. That force energy we both sensed was that of a new child born from the Force to defeat us. You must never allow yourself to fall to ruin, otherwise, you will fail your mission to kill Kenobi. Sidious said, as Vader just let out cautious breaths. I will see how the men are on building the Death Star. Once it is complete, control over the galaxy will finally be ours. Vader said, before walking away. His cape billowing after him as he left the room, but as we follow the Sith Lord, Vader. He was thinking about something that happened back when he was Anakin Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker was one of the greatest Jedi to ever live in the galaxy. His accomplishments within the Clone Wars were just signs of his greatness. But there was only one thing that Anakin Skywalker failed to do in his lifetime as a Jedi. It was the prevention of Padmé's death during childbirth. He followed Palpatine's orders of killing every single person who was within the Jedi Temple on Coruscant on the day of Order 66. The day he no longer was Anakin Skywalker, but Darth Vader, the strongest Sith Lord to ever be birthed from the Jedi Order. But that wasn't what was causing Darth Vader all the encompassing confusion, as well as fear brimming to the surface of his mind. There was one Jedi survivor that he never found. It was the Padawan to Egan Kolar who had been in hiding within the Jedi Temple. The young boy had managed to lose him within the planet called Earth on the very same day of Order 66 happening across the galaxy. If the boy was growing in power, he would need to visit the young man himself as Darth Vader in order to see if the young man is willing to learn more about the dark side of the Force. If he should become a Sith Lord, there might be a chance for him to overcome the power of Darth Sidious and take over the galaxy from Sidious control. It was a great plan to bring on an apprentice for himself, but he knew that if he failed in his mission to take down the Emperor of the Galaxy, Sidious would look at him with fury. He needed to bide his time with training a new member of the Sith Order, Not to mention that he should make sure that the boy doesn't even know about his presence as Anakin Skywalker. If he even remembers him. Getting into his TIE fighter, he flew over towards the construction of the Death Star as he thought about going to Earth in order to find the Padawan who had managed to escape his wrath. A few days would pass for Darth Vader. He had his plan all thought out as he walked to the chambers of Sidious on Coruscant. "What brings you to my office today, Lord Vader?" Sidious asked, with his honest-to-God terrifying smile on his face. "I have come here for a mission to a faraway planet within the southern galaxy on the Outer Rim. I have no idea how long it will be until I return, but I will let you know on the communicator." Darth Vader said, looking at his master, "So you want to go out and kill another Jedi, in the Outer Rim? Where did you get information about the Jedi scum?" Sidious questioned as Darth Vader had kept calm. "It was a last known communication from a Padawan. They were searching for more Jedi out in the cosmos. I answered, making them believe that I was Anakin Skywalker and returned to the light. They told me to head to their planet so they could plan out a way to meet with some other Jedi. Once I kill the Padawan and get the information from him, I will kill the other Jedi who are still living," Vader said, as Sidious smiled even more. "Do what you want, Lord Vader. Just make sure that you are back within range so that we can start questioning our operatives where the Resistance are located," Sidious said, as Vader nodded and left. Vader was outside of the Emperor's office and down near the elevator when he heard movement from his left. Looking towards it, he found a young man looking at him with both awe as well as curiosity, and walking over to the young man he stood straight as he saluted him. "What are you doing away from your station?" Vader questioned as the young man pulled out a notebook. "Lord Vader, you've been my inspiration to become stronger within the Empire. I wanted to know if you could give me your autograph," the young man asked, as Vader stared at the young man. His breathing apparatus was causing him some slight issues, but he thought nothing of it as he used the Force to sign the notebook. Leaving the young man to fanboy over the signature, he made the split-second decision to kill the young man right then and there. Once some stormtroopers arrived on the scene, they looked at Vader, who made a nodding gesture to them as they cleaned up the problem. Leaving towards his TIE fighter, Vader took off towards the outer rim of the galaxy, and as soon as he was entering the hyperspace, he thought about everything that led up to this moment. If I can get this Padawan to give me information about how he survived my attack on him about 10 years ago, I might let him live, Vader thought to himself as he made his way towards a familiar planet of blue and green as it floated softly across the galaxy. Izuku was moving about the area as he prepared for his internships to begin soon as he walked towards the train station. He had already picked out his hero name, that being the Jedi hero, Force. He had wanted to pay homage to his old master of Yoda by having his hero name be giving respect to the Jedi who had once proliferated the entire galaxy. Before Darth Vader had taken them down, Izuku was having his internship with a pro hero who was very good with swords, Yoroi Musha. The hero had given him an internship request, and the young man had known about the hero's wishes of retiring soon and giving his mantle as a sword-wielding hero title to someone else. And with Izuku showing signs of wanting to use a sword-fighting style, he had asked Izuku to join his agency in order to have an internship to increase his own prowess. He was nearing the train station with his entire class when he felt a massive force presence making itself known across the planet. It was here that Izuku froze in place as he started to feel a bunch of sweat forming across his face, as well as his fear was giving way to others to notice entirely. "Midoriya, is something wrong?" Aizawa asked, looking at Izuku with a bored look, but was very worried. I need to get out of here," Izuku said, as he started to take a knee and hyperventilate. "What are you talking about, Midoriya?" Aizawa asked, much more concerned now. He's coming for me. He is coming for me," Izuku muttered out, breathing much more hysterically. Everyone crowded around Izuku to make sure that the young man was feeling all right, and as soon as they heard rhythmic breathing behind themselves, they all turned around to face someone. Izuku had immediately stood up now as he looked at the figure behind Aizawa with fear as he took a few steps backwards. Aizawa turned around to feel the foreboding presence behind himself, and as soon as he saw the man behind himself. Aizawa had felt so much fear from the presence the man presented himself with that he compared it to a villain he had met in the past. His presence is so much horrifying that villain. There is no escape. Aizawa thought as the rhythmic breathing continued as the man stared at Izuku. Because of his raging fear as well as thoughts, Aizawa had pressed his button on his phone in order to call for backup. This villain was too powerful for himself. Tell me, where would I find the one named Izuku Midoriya? The voice asked, with a lot of power behind it. Yagi-san, you are needed at the train station where Aizawa-kun was last seen. You need to go as fast as possible, Nezu said on his phone. What are you talking about, Nezu? From what my map says there is nothing going on there. All Might said, looking at his phone outside. Now is not the time for your insolence, Yagi. I need you at the train station as fast as possible. It has something to do with young Midoriya. Nezu said, as that got Yagi running towards the train station. Nezu looked at his phone, which was pinging Aizawa's location, not to mention the fact that there was a message with it as well as a picture. This is something that even I had not prepared for. I wonder how strong and powerful this man is. As well as who he may be under the mask, Nezu said, as he looked at the footage of the train station with the man in all black attire as well as a black mask staring at Izuku. His aura seems to be that of someone extremely powerful, because Midoriya has faced people who had a smaller aura and still stayed hopeful. Not to mention that Midoriya is showing signs of complete fear as well as hysteria. Nezu muttered to himself as he tried to get the nearby cameras to record everything. Can you inform me of your name, Jedi Hero, Force? The masked individual asked, glaring at Izuku through his mask. Izuku stood forwards as the rest of his class stood away with sweat falling down their face as the young man looked at the masked individual. I am Jedi Hero, Force. What do you need, sir? Izuku asked. He knew who this man was. His presence was almost easily distinguishable from how he stood in front of him. This was the fallen Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. Turned Sith Lord Darth Vader. He had overheard the conversation between Skywalker as well as Darth Sidious, and he knew that Sidious had sent Vader out here to kill him. Intake of breath. I have come here to test your strength against mine. If you are powerful enough to land a single blow against me. I may just train you in the ways of the dark side of the Force. Exhale of breath, Vader said, as he glared at Izuku. What I must, I will do, Izuku said, with a determined look. Standing across from the villainous Sith Lord, the air moved about them as Izuku had ignited his blade, with Vader doing the same. As they walked to one another, they tested their strength against one another as they clashed a few times in the street. Everyone nearby had started to run away as soon as the two clashed in the middle of the street, causing some people to cry out for help. As Vader moved for more precision-based strikes, his powerful limbs had helped him increase his own basic strength to that of a powerful Jedi's strikes. Izuku's entire form was completely mastered, and Vader could see that Izuku was dodging the strikes as well as countering with powerful strikes of his own. He might even be able to pose a challenge to me when he reaches his full maturity. Vader thought in his head. The two then started to increase their pace as they moved about the area with wide arcs and using the Force in order to blast the other away. Izuku moved in for an early strike towards the breathing apparatus on Darth Vader's chest as he swung his blade in a familiar arc that Vader recognized. Blocking the arcs expertly, the Sith Lord had increased his powerful strikes against Izuku's own strikes as well as blocks and parries. He then moved forwards and kicked Izuku in the chest, knocking him to the ground, as Vader slowly walked towards him. Breathing in and out through the apparatus. You are indeed powerful in the light side of the Force, youngling. But you will not be able to defeat me with that power. You need to channel all the power of the dark side of the Force in order to defeat me. Vader said, as he closed in on the prone Izuku. Standing up as fast as possible, Izuku stood in a different stance, something that he decided to learn early on in his time on Earth when he escaped the Empire. He entered the Vapod form as he glared at Vader with disdain as well as determination. I won't lose to you, even if I die on this day. I will buy enough time for my classmates to escape from this place. Izuku said, as Vader breathed through his apparatus and calmly watched Izuku. As the two moved in towards one another, they entered a clash as their blades held against the other, Izuku using all the strength he had in order to keep Vader away from himself. You have experience in the battlefield, but you don't have enough power to kill me. How will you be able to win if you are constantly thinking about death? Vader questioned as he pushed harder. The blades of both Sith and Jedi were moving towards Izuku's face as the young man had started to position himself into a different spot as he did something that surprised Vader temporarily. He turned off his lightsaber and allowed Vader to overextend his blade, stumbling a little as Izuku swung his own blade downward and sliced off a portion of his face mask. As Vader growled in pain, he moved backwards as he glared back at Izuku with his now visible eye, and Izuku saw the yellow ingrained eye. I'm sorry you had to fall to the dark side in order to attempt to save someone you loved, Anakin, but it's not too late to change sides. Izuku said, as he stared into the eye. The yellow in the eye flickered between yellow and blue for just a millisecond before it stayed yellow, and Vader glared at Izuku and re-entered battle. The two clashed blades over and over as Aizawa had got his kids to a respectable distance when he heard someone land behind himself. Sorry for being late, Aizawa-kun. Traffic was terrible before getting here. What's going on? All Might asked, in his hero form. Man in the black suit and breathing apparatus, he just appeared out of nowhere and had scared the ever-loving shit out of my students. Midoriya took it the hardest as he started to hyperventilate. He's only fighting the man to a standstill. He won't last long, Aizawa said, as All Might moved towards the fight. Thank you for the information, Aizawa. All Might said, preparing to move. Careful, he has telekinesis, Aizawa called out, as All Might gave a sound of affirmation. As Izuku clashed blades over and over again, he was starting to feel his strength wane and his stamina lower to dangerous levels. Looking Vader in the eye caused him to feel even more fear build up within himself as he started to use that fear itself in order to keep himself alive. Dodging unlockable blows, using the Force to constrict Vader's breathing apparatus in order to give himself space, fighting a very powerful Sith Lord was very hard. Izuku didn't know how Anakin had defeated Count Dooku when he had above Coruscant. The power Anakin held now was leagues above Darth Tyrannus. And as Izuku was about to be grabbed with the Force, he heard a voice that simultaneously caused great relaxation within his mind, but also brought concern to his mind. Fear not, citizens. Why? A familiar voice called out behind Vader. Turning around to look at the new arrival, Vader looked at the man who had appeared through a smoke cloud as the hero had glared at the much shorter villain. Who are Arg? Vader tried to question the person who arrived but was interrupted by the newcomer smashing his fist into the villain's lower back, sending him flying into the nearby building. For I am here, All Might said, as he gave a smirking frown. Young Midoriya. I came as fast as I could. Who is this bastard and why did he attack you all? All Might called out, standing next to Izuku. We're dead. We're dead. Ichi's gonna kill us. Izuku stuttered out, as All Might looked at the young man again. The look the young man was giving, as well as showing for him to see, was not very heroic. If anything, it looks as though he wishes to flee the area. Young Midoriya, you remember the ways of a hero, correct? All Might asked, as Izuku looked at him with concern written on his face. Yes, but that doesn't matter against someone who can use the Force, All Might. He can literally kill us with his Force capabilities without his blade. Izuku said, before he heard some movement inside the building. Stopping their talk with one another, they looked and watched in shock as well as building fear as Vader walked out of the wreckage, seemingly glaring at them in fury. You do not know the power of the dark side, Vader said, calmly. A little too calmly. Anakin, if you're in there, fight the dark side. Izuku called out, as Vader glared at him from within his suit. Young Midoriya, I don't think that the person who you are calling out to is in there anymore. All Might said, as he got into a combat stance. I can't just give up on Anakin. He was the strongest of the Jedi Order. He wouldn't give in to the dark side that easily. Izuku said, as he activated his lightsaber as Vader did the same, and they moved to clash once more. With the conflicting energies as well as Force power between Izuku and Vader, everything around them was starting to become chaos. All Might move in for an attack from behind, and as Vader came to turn around to grab the hero, Izuku flew downward and went to slice the apparatus on the Sith Lord's chest. Forced to dodge the attack, Vader jumped away before using the Force in order to force push All Might into a separate building. Vader then moved in on Izuku as the young knight had done an underhanded swipe, Swinging his blade downward, he watched in awe as Izuku turned off his lightsaber as soon as Vader's blade made contact with his own and turned it back on as soon as Izuku's wrists as well as arms were in position to strike a lethal blow. Moving his chest out of the way just in time, Vader growled at Izuku as he started to increase his strength in his fight against Izuku. You dare use underhanded tactics as if you aren't a Jedi. You must remember that the Jedi did not consent to those kinds of tactics on the battlefield. Vader taunted as Izuku glared at him harder. I may not be a Jedi Master, but that doesn't mean that I can't use those kinds of tactics. The Jedi Order is dead, but I am one of its surviving members. So long as I breath, I will use any tactic in order to survive, even if it's against my own code. Izuku said, as he prepared for another fight. As the two glared at one another, the people surrounding them had watched on in both horror as well as awe as the two fought. They moved as if they were blurring the next moment, clashing a few times, and once All Might recovered and entered the fray, Vader was pushed back once again. But Izuku knew better. They had to bide their time, and make sure that they didn't go for any unnecessary attacks that could split them up again. On the other side of the galaxy, Sidious, the Emperor of the entire galaxy, had felt a massive shift in the Force. It wasn't that big or massive in comparison to what he had done in the past, but it was enough that he looked over to the small planet that he found Izuku on. Earth. Looking at the planet with his Sith alchemy, he had found what he was looking for. A battle was brewing between two people. His apprentice as well as... Well, here is a surprise. It is the one boy who Sidious thought could become his new apprentice when he ran out of uses for Vader himself. It seems that Vader is going easy on that young boy. I will need him to bring the boy to me so that I can train him in the dark side, harness its power, and soon the galaxy will be so far into the dark side of the Force, the light will never return. Sidious said, as he started to cackle maniacally. The air had been filled with ozone. The heroes had now arrived on the scene. But they were being tossed around like ragdolls. Izuku was the only one who was capable of keeping pace with Vader, as the Sith Lord wasn't even trying to defend himself against his opponents. The top 10 heroes within Japan were being tossed around as if they were mere children, and the young man who was able to fight Vader was just barely being able to hold off against the villain. The two were now fighting in the middle of the street, rain pouring down from the sky as they battled for supremacy. The battle had been going on for at least a few hours, so much so that the students who were supposed to go on their little internships had been forced to return to Ua in order to stay safe. Izuku, being on the front lines, had been incapable of escaping from the villain, as he would merely follow in pursuit. So as the young man was fighting hard for survival, he noticed something about Vader as the Sith was moving towards him through the destruction of Musutafu. The man had been walking with a slight limp in his left leg, as if it wasn't purely skin and bone, and that was when he saw it for a brief moment. A spark coming from the left ankle, and Izuku knew what to do. So as he baited the Sith Lord into fighting him, they clashed once more as the Sith pushed even more power into his attack, sending Izuku tumbling backward into the ground. You are tiring, Jedi Padawan. You seem to have gotten stronger since we last met. But not by much, it shames me to admit it. But you had managed to hold me off for quite a while despite me not using the full power of the dark side. Vader said, as he slowly walked, hiding his limp. As soon as Vader stared down at Izuku, he found the young man battered and bruised as he struggled to sit up against the wall. Lifting the young man with the Force, Izuku struggled weakly in the Sith's grip as the man breathed through his machine, thinking about what to do with Izuku. He couldn't allow him to live. Their fight against one another had definitely caught the attention of his master. So as he was about to snap Izuku's neck in the best way to end the young boy from living further, he heard a comm link from the ship he left in hyperspace. Lord Vader, I do hope that you aren't going to kill that boy? His master's voice called out from the comm link. He has given me a fight worthy of a Jedi Master. But his form was weak, and his power fleeting. I don't think that he was the one who you saw in your visions. Vader said, as he softly lowered the boy to the ground. I don't care about semantics, you are to bring him to me alive, or else. Sidious called out from the comms before turning them off. Looking at Izuku, Vader growled softly before moving to pick the boy up, but as soon as he reached out with the Force, with what seemed like the most precision throughout their entire fight. Vader watched in horror as Izuku moved as fast as he could, turning on his lightsaber and slicing it through his legs before swinging his blade through his midsection and then moving to slice off his head. It was so fast that Vader had no time in order to react as his head was taken from his body and was tossed around the street as Izuku sat there with the most pained and fearful expression on his face he had ever felt. Almost as soon as that had happened, Izuku felt something wash over him. The Force. It felt as though the dark side of it had faded a massive amount. There was still a very large amount within the Force, but it was enough to know that there was a chance to kill the Emperor and free everything from his grasp. But almost as fast as he could react, Izuku felt his legs soon lose their ability to move as he felt all the bones in them break apart to the point that Izuku grunted in pain. He was in so much pain that he started to hysterically laugh as he noticed what he had managed to do in the last 10 years that he hadn't been able to do. He managed to kill a Sith Lord, and not just any Sith Lord. Darth Vader, the one who had haunted his nightmares as well as caused the end of the Jedi Order. All that was left was to defeat the Emperor. Emperor Palpatine and the entire galaxy would be saved from his powerful might. Looking to the sky, he watched as some heroes had landed near him as they appraised him and took him away. Everything was more akin to a blur after that, fading in and out of consciousness, but above all else, he felt elation at the fact that he avenged his master who had been killed at the start of this whole thing. Master, did I finally become a Jedi Master? Izuku muttered as the hero holding him noticed him passing out. Hurry up already people, we have an injured kid going into shock. The very feminine, but tomboy-esque voice called out. Before passing out completely, Izuku heard the woman calling out to him, but it was all muffled. But he did take notice of one thing. The bunny ears on top of her head, which were white in color, had stood out to him, and he only knew one heroine with that quirk. Mirko? Izuku questioned before everything went black. Mirko had been jumping from building to building as she was holding the unconscious Force wielder over her shoulder as she grumbled. I swear this bastard better pay me back for doing this for him. I know I heard him barely say my hero name, Mirko said, as she finally jumped one last time and landed in front of Ua Academy. The rest of the students of Class 1A saw how Izuku was being carried into the school grounds unconscious by Mirko, and the couple girls who were staring at the moment were scared for his health. Mirko passed through the students and made sure to move as fast as possible to get Izuku inside of Recovery Girl's office. Whilst this was happening, Nezu was in an emergency meeting with the rest of his colleagues as they talked about what in the world had happened. All right, we need to get to the bottom of this attack on Musutafu, Nezu said, as he looked at each and every teacher of Ua. Who in the world was that guy in the black armor as well as mask? Aizawa asked, as he was concerned. I have had some of my police consultants do some blood tests on the old man inside the armor, and for some reason his blood doesn't even register as one of our inhabitants. Nezu said, as the entire room went up in uproar. What do you mean there isn't anyone who hasn't been born with his blood type? Present Mike called out. Are you saying that there is no one in history with a similar blood type to him? Midnight asked, as Yagi Toshinori had stood up. I believe that the only answers we will be getting are from young Midoriya himself. He seemed to know that Darth Vader man when we were fighting. He kept talking about how we were both going to die. Toshinori said, as everyone looked to him. What do you mean by that All Might? Aizawa questioned, deeply concerned. I meant what I said. Young Midoriya was having a mild panic attack during the fight. He was talking about how Darth Vader was going to kill us without remorse. And the most important part about the man was that he wasn't the only Sith Lord in the galaxy. Toshinori said, as he stared at Aizawa, so you mean to tell me that there may be another Sith Lord that young Midoriya knows about? Why hasn't this come out earlier? Nezu questioned. Because of the fact he doesn't trust us enough to tell us about where he originally came from before arriving on Earth. Toshinori said, as everyone was silent. If they were going to get answers from Izuku, they needed him to be as calm as possible as well as fully healed from his injuries. Considering he was the only person aside from All Might who could keep up with the Sith Lord, which was really terrifying, they really needed to get to the bottom of this situation and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And because of this attack on young Midoriya, the internships that all the students were about to embark on was put on hold since they needed to make sure that their atmosphere was cleared from any and all attacks. Unknown to everyone on Earth, Darth Sidious would be having a much harder time in fighting the spawn of Vader deep in space and would be defeated by him. Lying in bed, Izuku would wake up from his living nightmare with a massive spike in his heart rate as he sat up immediately holding his chest hyperventilating. Recovery Girl would run over in order to make sure that he was all right, bringing him back from his hyperventilation with soft words as well as her calming aura. Izuku listened to her words of breathing in for a few seconds as well as letting out said breath for a few seconds. Once he was fully recovered from his panic attack, he stared at her and gave her his thanks for helping him in his lowest moment of his life. And as he started to feel out with the force, he noticed something odd about the known galaxy he could sense. The darkness of the G galaxy, it's gone. Izuku muttered as Recovery Girl stared at him. What are you talking about now, young man? She asked, as Izuku stared at her with renewed strength as well as happiness. The Dark Lord of the Sith, Emperor Palpatine otherwise known as Darth Sidious has been defeated. Izuku said, as tears brimmed on the edges of his vision. As Recovery Girl heard this, she gave Izuku a pat on his left thigh before walking away and informing her allies of Izuku's revelation. Whilst she was gone, Izuku felt out for Palpatine in the Force, but since his presence was near non-existent, he let out a small huff of breath. The man who single-handedly caused the destruction of the Jedi had been completely wiped away from the Force itself. And as he went to stand up, two people entered the room to keep an eye on him as he was about to get off the bed. What are you doing, young man? Shouldn't you be staying in bed? A voice questioned, as Izuku looked over at the door. He found a tall man with a beige-tan overcoat staring at him from the doorway. He had black hair as well as eyes as he walked over to him. Sorry, just excited at the moment, Izuku said, as the man just patted Izuku's head. Well, I guess I should inform you about who I am, the man said, as Izuku stared at him. My name is Tsukauchi Naomasa, and I am a detective within the police precinct within Tokyo. My quirk is named Lie Detector, and we are only here to ask you a few questions about what happened at the Musudafu General Train Station. Tsukauchi said, as Izuku nodded. Alright, now what were you and your class doing before this? Darth Vader attacked you all, Tsukauchi asked, as Izuku told him about how his class were preparing for their internships when they were suddenly attacked. Truth, alright, now for the hard part. Do you know who Darth Vader was originally? We know that Darth Vader hasn't got any records on Earth for our human species. Naomasa asked, as Izuku sighed. That's because Darth Vader before he became a Sith Lord wasn't born on Earth, Izuku said, as Naomasa looked shocked. Where was he born then? He asked, as Izuku looked to him. He was born on a planet called Dagobah. It's a sandy planet that was filled to the brim with slavery. He lost his mom to Tusken Raiders considering she was still a slave at the time, Izuku said, as Naomasa nodded. For the remaining time between the two, Izuku spoke about the actions of Palpatine as well as Anakin Skywalker throughout the Clone Wars as well as after the event itself. Once Izuku finished his tale of how he himself landed on Earth in an attempt to escape the young Dark Lord of the Sith, Naomasa couldn't help but think that when Izuku was younger, he had been given the greatest amount of luck possible. Leaving Izuku inside the recovery office, the detective went to inform the heroes of the school about the situation, especially with how Izuku was incredibly relieved when he felt that there was no more breathtaking darkness surrounding the known galaxy. Alone in his room now, Izuku laid back down on the bed as he thought about what he should do now that Sith Lords who terrified him in his dreams were now dead. He would fall asleep in the cot as he was completely unaware of how 3 Force ghosts would appear near the edge of the bed. As he was sleeping, the Force ghost of Grandmaster Yoda would place a hand over Izuku's forehead as he imbued him with some Force energy. Was that wise Master Yoda? An old voice asked, as Yoda looked over to him. Keep him alive we must, one of the last Jedi, he is. Yoda said, as the old man chuckled. Well, far be it from me to keep my powers at bay for a while. He may become one of the most powerful Jedi our Order has ever seen aside from Skywalker's son as well as Skywalker himself. The old man said, as Yoda and the old man disappeared from the mortal plane. 5. Izuku woke up the next morning feeling refreshed as he thought about what he and his class will do since they hadn't started their internships. He wanted to learn from the hero he was assigned in how to learn to use the blade better since he wanted to learn all forms of lightsaber combat. And he could create his own living on Earth and learning from some of the best sword fighters the planet could offer. But that was beside the point right now. As he tried to get up from his cot, he couldn't help but feel as though something was keeping him tethered to the cot itself. Lifting the blanket that was over him slightly, he soon found out the reason why he couldn't move from his position. Laying on top of his chest was a set of clothing whose owner was invisible, and as he placed his hand on where he believed was their head of hair, he started patting it softly. A small groan of a mule had resounded from the room as Izuku's face became a roaring blush as the girl had slowly sat up. She stretched her body as she fully straddled him as Izuku's rising blush was becoming more and more pronounced. Especially in his trousers. Ahaya, yawn. The adorable voice of Hagakure Toru said, as she laid back down on Izuku's bare chest. As soon as the girl was about to fall asleep, she immediately sat back up again as Izuku was looking her where he believed her eyes were located as the girl let out an adorable eep. With her jumping out of the bed, Izuku used the force to make sure that she didn't accidentally hurt herself by softly placing her on the ground. Sorry about waking you up, Hagakure-san. But you didn't have to do that. Izuku said, looking to the side blushing. No, it's my fault. You were sleeping and I was spending some time to see if you were alright. Toru said, as Izuku looked back at her. Not that I should be saying this. But this is the first time we're meeting, I think. Izuku asked, as the girl nodded. You protected me the entire fight you had against that black armored guy. I wanted to thank you but ended up sleeping on top of you last night. You're surprisingly warm when you are sleeping. Toru said, as a light tease, but Izuku shook his head. As the two devolved into a silent peace, Recovery Girl eventually arrived inside the room as she saw the two sitting with blushing faces. Well, I think that whatever you girls are doing to him is working. Keep it up, and at least wear some protection next time. But for the moment I need to check on Midoriya-kun, so please leave Hagakure-chan. Recovery Girl said, as the girl eeped and left the room as fast as possible. Sorry Mrs. Recovery Girl. I didn't mean to break any rules with her in here last night. Izuku mumbled as Recovery Girl just sighed. You were not in trouble, young man, at least yet. What were you thinking taking on a man who was many times your senior? She asked exasperatedly. I was the only one who could fight him. If you are talking about Darth Vader. Izuku said, as he stuttered a bit. Yes, I am referring to Darth Vader. But there is a reason we have heroes, kid. They can deal with someone like that man. A young boy like yourself who hasn't made it through his school year cannot be allowed to fight someone so strong so early in his career. Recovery Girl said, finishing her checkup. There was no one who could hold a candle to Darth Vader. He was too strong for even All Might on his own. I think he was holding back on both of us in that fight. Izuku said, as Recovery Girl scoffed. Then at least you should have run away. There is no problem with running away from a very terrifying opponent who is more powerful than you are, young man. Recovery Girl said, as Izuku immediately retorted. If I did that, then he would have found me later on. There is no place in the galaxy safe from Darth Vader's wrath. Izuku said, in complete seriousness. I wasn't telling you to hide from him, young man. I am a doctor. It's my job to give you options to prevent such damage happening to you. Recovery Girl said, as Izuku slumped. Your body has recovered enough for you to head back to the dorms that Nezu has finished building. I will see you all when you return from your internships next week. Recovery Girl said, as she left the room so Izuku could change. We're still going on our internships? Izuku questioned to himself quietly. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop green hearts in the comments so I can know who watches the video till the end, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.